Hey, everybody, it's Devin and James here. We're here before we enter the Den of Sin to say a little bit about the Anchor app and Anchor FM, where we record our podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
And if you're like James and myself living so far apart, we record ours and we're able to upload onto Anchor FM with no problems at all. And by hosting on Anchor, they distribute our podcast to all of the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. It's a huge list.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in literally one place.
And you know what the best part of all is, James?
Is it because the Anchor is totally free?
It's because Anchor is totally free.
That's always the best part. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, and on to the den.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Den of Sin with Devin and James. I am one of your hosts, James Dufresne, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime. I almost called you the Robin to my Batman, but that is so not an accurate description of this. That would be far too arrogant.
Holy mislabeling.
Exactly. So you are the Butch to my Sundance.
That could work. I'll take either of those. Yeah.
I would say, right? You can't go. That's why I tried to think of a partnership that you can't go wrong with either one. Really, you're the Bert to my Dom DeLuise, if we're being. But anyway,
does that make Casey Jerry Reed or something? Because that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, sure. We'll give him Jerry Reed. I think he'd probably. If I'm being honest, I think he would actually want Dom more. I think he'd be Captain Courageous. So
Captain Chaos.
Captain Chaos, yes, and then or Captain USA,
right?
Yeah. So either way, but as always, we are here today as a special Part 2 episode of our Friday the 13th retrospective, which I really enjoyed filming the first one. Wish we could have fit all of the films, but to be fair, there's a lot of these movies, so. There was no way on earth we would have been able to get it all into one episode. And then we would be doing a disservice to this legendary franchise as well. So
agreed. I didn't want to say anything to jinx it, but my feeling going into the last episode was this is going to be a volume 2, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely two-parter. You try to be hopeful for the sake of brevity for our listeners' patience, but again, this is it's a franchise that you and I both have cared about for a very long time. It's meant something to us. So yeah, I know, Devin, we have talked. There's a few things you wanted to mention about the films we did discuss in the last episode.
Well, yeah, it's one of the good things about doing the the continuations is that if you missed something, sometimes you can backpedal a little bit. But I do want to keep on moving forward, so I'll try to make it as brief as I can. I guess the biggest one in terms of like the most explanation is something that we did touch on, but that I kind of want to make a bit of a course correction on. And that was on Part 4, the final chapter.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about Joseph Zito on the set being kind of hard on his actors. And we also discussed the fact that his back was against the wall, even though I will also argue that considering all of his other work, or not all, but much of his major work was with Canon Films, his back was probably against the wall on everything he did.
Yeah, that's true.
He might have been picked just because he was so good at operating on that level.
Yeah.
So this is not a hit piece on him or anything, but I did want to point out the actress that was freezing in the lake. Her name's Judy Aronson, and that was to familiarize people with the story. That was when the guy who played Jason in Part 4, Ted White, was actually going to storm off the set if Joseph Zito didn't listen to the cries and complaints of the poor actress who was having to stay in the lake when it's not summer as they were shooting for a really long time. And finally, I think after Ted White said that he was going to leave, Joe Zito kind of made sure to wrap it up quickly. But the outcome ultimately was that poor actress got hypothermia So that part didn't get mentioned, and I think we kind of. It's not a matter of letting Joseph Zito off easy. I'm not trying to come down on it. It's very common behavior in the film business, but it's starting to become more and more obvious to the powers that be that it's really not the best way for people to operate in the workplace, in an artistic space, or any space. And there are times where sometimes the film industry is just going to be an 18-hour a day sort of job. And that comes from just circumstances of shooting on a location or something like that, but it really needs to not be the norm. And even if you do have a really long day, like the first and foremost thing that any director or any producer or anybody else should be concerned about is the safety of the people on set. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't just glossing over that story because the actress got hypothermia. Like she had to spend a couple days in the hospital in order to get an extra shot of somebody swimming in Crystal Lake. Like,
yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, it's, I've never made a film. I'm sure, as a director, you have a lot of things on your shoulders and you're trying to, but like you said, safety is not, as we've learned, throughout history and very recently, nothing should trump safety. So ever, there's no excuse to cause bodily injury or to risk someone's health ever, no matter what your profession is. So yes. But again, like you said, it's, this isn't a hit piece on Joe Zito. I don't know him personally. He did make one of my favorite Friday 13th though, so I'll give him that.
and my favorite, or amongst my favorite Chuck Norris movies. So
that's right, exactly. I almost said my all-time favorite, but then I start to think about, especially some of his earlier films that I really like, and even stuff like Hero and the Terror, which isn't necessarily a good movie, but it's like
it's totally enjoyable. Yeah.
But
yeah, I wanted to point it out because I think it's something that is only going to change in the industry if it's pointed out as a flaw in the system, and without necessarily having to point fingers in this particular case. There's lots of cases where fingers can and should be pointed, but this is just pointing at the industry as a whole. Like this should be called out, whether it's happening now or whether it's happening in a movie that we're talking about on the podcast. Just anything to bring awareness to the idea that this should be changed.
Couldn't agree more.
On to the next thing that I wanted to mention, which is a lot more fun and hopefully won't require too big of a discussion. But I can't believe we talked about Friday the 13th Part 3 for as long as we did and never brought up the fucking biker gang of Fox, Loco, and Ali.
Exactly. It's funny. That was one. So that was literally one thing I have to regret, because there's one of them and that was a time when like punks and bikers were used as like extra bad guys or extra, like there's so many, the movie Grotesque, like there's all these movies that at that time which were placing punkers and bikers and all this sort of ambiguously like counterculture people as like these street villains and stuff. But specifically the group, they were all really good in their small roles, and also they had great kills in it too.
They did, especially Fox.
Yeah, well, exactly. And she's a very I just really like, I don't know the actress, from other things, but I just always thought she looked cool in the movie, and I just liked her vibe. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I felt bad because they were like an interesting element. Some of the later, which we'll get into, some of the later Friday 13th add sort of like extra villains into the movie, but it wasn't very common. Even in Part 4, you have the psychopath. I'm blanking the character's name, but the psychopath, who murders. I'm blanking on characters' names, but
you're talking about Vic and Joey in Part 5.
Vic, yeah. So Vic is sort of in that mold, but
Vic, the one guy who doesn't get killed, by the way.
Yeah.
The fact that he gets arrested saves him from the
slaughter that comes. Yes, yeah. Exactly. but yeah, it's an early example of them throwing in other antagonists, which I thought was actually cool. I actually liked that, and that has happened in other horror films where you have two sort of, the protagonists have to deal with two threats. Obviously, one threat is far bigger than, but anyways, I just thought it was an interesting thing. And you sort of, I think one of the things, especially with slashers at this era, and I think we've talked about this before, is that audience started rooting for the bad. They started rooting for the Jasons and the Freddys. So I don't know if that was an early example of the producers being like, well, these are some people that, that the fans can really get behind Jason killing, as opposed to the poor, just horny, dope smoking teenagers or whatever. So I don't know if it was that.
Kids, yeah.
But yeah, interesting little thing. And I always enjoyed that at those, those additions to part 3.
Right. And Ali ends up coming in the end and
Exactly.
kind of helping to save the day.
Hey, yeah.
And there is an alternate ending where he survives as well, which I would love to see.
There are so many weird alternate endings in this franchise. My favorite, and I use that in quotations, I'll talk about later tonight.
Okay, good.
But yeah. But yeah, I mean, dead on. That was something, as soon as we finished talking, I was like, oh, we didn't mention the biker gangs with their stupid names. I guess they were bikers. They all need nicknames.
Yeah. Fox, Ali, and Loco.
Loco. Yeah, who's definitely a white guy.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the proper movies is the concept of I, Jason. Have you heard anything about I, Jason?
That sounds familiar, but I don't think so.
You may have heard of it, or we may have even have discussed it at some point, and we just didn't know it by this name. But it involves Stephen King. Does that sound familiar?
This does sound familiar, yes.
Okay, this was only a couple of years ago. Stephen King tweeted out a thread in which he said, and this is quoting the tweets, "The best novel idea I never wrote and probably never will is I, Jason, the first person narrative of Jason Voorhees and his hellish fate, killed over and over again at Camp Crystal Lake. What a hellish existential fate. Just thinking about the legal thicket one would have to go through to get permissions makes my head ache, and my heart that too. But gosh, shouldn't someone tell Jason's side of the story?" And then the last tweet he sent was, "Blumhouse could do it as a movie."
And the thing is, like, it's funny because I feel like this is all like prelude to things we'll talk about later, but I do think a later film, okay, I will say that I think the remake, while it doesn't directly address that, I think it shows a different side of Jason that isn't, for many reasons, which we'll get into it. But
yeah,
it's not that it's more sympathetic, but he's, I don't know, we'll get into it, I guess. But
I could have sworn I've heard like King. I don't think was ever interviewed on this specifically, but I want to say I heard him as a guest on Mick Garris's podcast Postmortem, because if anybody was ever going to get Stephen King as a guest, it would be Mick Garris.
Garris, yeah.
Stephen King's not going to do a podcast for anybody else. But I could almost swear, this is just going off of an old memory, so please nobody quote me on this, but I think Mick did ask him about this idea. I'm going to have to go back tonight and listen again. I should have done that last night. Sorry, folks. But you can probably find it, Stephen King on Mick Garris Postmortem. But I remember somewhere Stephen King saying, "This would be my best story and it will make you weep." Like, wow. Like he was really going to go at it and like make you have all the feels for Jason, which, God damn it, it would just be so good. What? Somebody let Stephen King do this. Can whoever hold, I know the rights are all up in the air.
Well, that's right the thing is, I was just about to say you beat me to it, which is that famously, the rights have been in limbo. The history of this film franchise is already complicated enough, but in the last 2 years, the original writer for the first film and oh God, I'm blanking on everybody's names once again. And I'm on a podcast and I can't remember names. That doesn't really work well, does it? But the director and the writer have
Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham.
Vic Miller, thank you. Yes, and Sean Cunningham. Thank you. They're in a legal battle over rights, so that's why if you are a fan of video games, the very well done Friday the 13th game that came out, I think 9 years ago, might have been even longer. They can't produce any new content for it because there's a rights issue and stuff, which is a bummer because that game is. I don't even play video games, but it's a great game and very faithful to the franchise and very cool. But they can't do that. That's why there's a rumor of a new movie, but you'll never. Yeah, I've never seen that
a couple times. I'm sure they will make a 13th. The temptation would be too great, and there's too many people out there with completists and people with OCD and whatever. It's just it bothers us. Like I don't have OCD, but I'm definitely a completist. And I
mean, if they don't do it for the 30th, which would be the 50th not the 30th, 2030, which would be the 50th anniversary of it. I mean, we kind of just. If they don't make some movie at that point but again, never say never. I still remember people saying, there will never be I still remember people saying there will never be a Freddy versus Jason movie way back in the day because they were at one point owned by separate companies, and New Line bought the rights to Jason Voorhees, which we talked about that whole thing on this podcast. Anyways, this is a weird tangent. So, but yes, yeah, I would like to see it. It's unfortunately though the rights are in limbo. How did we start talking about this?
Because we were talking about how bad
Stephen
we want
King.
Stephen King to do it. Yeah, it'd be like two of the biggest 80s influences on my horror hungry mind joining forces.
That's the thing, is that it seems like something that was exactly like a childhood dream of the 80s, which was like, imagine if Stephen King could write a Friday the 13th movie or a Nightmare on Elm Street. And we now live in an era where nerd dreams come true. Everything is based off of being a nerd. So if any decade, any era could hopefully make it a reality, and Stephen King is not a young man, so we need to, if we're going to get it, we need to do it soon. But again, legal rights and everything. But as a huge Stephen King fan, and as a huge, I'm wearing a Creepshow t-shirt as I'm saying this. Yeah, it would be one of those rare what ifs that I would love to see actually happen.
Same here. So should we move on to the rest of the series? We kind of cleanly ended things with part 5 being well, Jason isn't, depending on how you look at it, Jason isn't in part 5, but it would be kind of the last of the era of the living Jason era, and I think kind of the last of a particular vibe, because even though part 5 strays from what people wanted on such a tremendous level, I don't think it strays that far from the tone of what came before it. It felt a part of the series, and Friday the 13th part 6, Jason Lives, really took things into a different direction. Well, first off, I want to point out, this is just an IMDb fun fact that that was too dumb to not point out. If you look at part 6 of the two franchises that are tied together now, part 6 is Jason Lives, and part 6 is Freddy's Dead.
Yeah. Yes.
But anyways, that's neither here nor there. The movie itself lets you know right where its heads at right at the start, with the weird sort of James Bond opening with Jason stepping into the site like opening of a classic James Bond movie, and the way that James Bond turns and shoots at the camera. In this case, Jason throws his machete right at you.
Yeah.
So
it comes, which I guess was a practical effect. I did not know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a practical effect.
God bless them for that. Yeah,
I know exactly. Before we get into it, so I think historically the fandom, now that we have the internet, back in the day, you might have loved part 3, and then other people might like part 5, but there was no general consensus outside of which movies made the most money or whatever, or which ones had the best rentals. But I think for the longest time, thanks to the internet and the internet fandom, I think part 5 is, in the last 10, 15 years, has become sort of a consensus of people's either favorite or second favorite or tied for favorite.
You mean part 6?
Yeah, so sorry, part 6. Yeah, no, very few people think part 5 is the best. And I do like it, but I do have to say, a lot of the criticisms that get lobbed at other Friday the 13th movies, as far as pacing and stuff, are sort of I have that problem with this film, which I do think it's a little uneven, which, I know some people will say that's, crazy, but I also hate the opening. I think I said it even last week, or I remember thinking it last time we recorded, that the whole like Frankenstein, which I know is an homage, but it's so dumb. It's so dumb. It doesn't make any sense. It's literally just lightning. It's not like, there's no formula, or, it's just a stupid way to resuscitate him. Not the stupidest thing they'll ever do with him, as we will definitely talk about tonight. But I will say, though, I still like it. If only the distinction that it is still the coolest looking Jason in any of the films. Zombified Jason is the coolest looking, hands down, the best Jason in my opinion. So
you're saying you have a hard time with lightning being the Frankenstein tribute in the beginning. I don't understand why Tommy needs to dig up the body to see it in the first place. I mean, it's
makes exactly.
If you're following any kind of lineage, which we certainly are more than the filmmakers were, the beginning of part 5 and part 6 are practically identical, that involve Tommy Jarvis being there as Jason is being dug up from the grave. One turns out to be a dream sequence starring Corey Feldman, and this time it turns out to be real.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything about Tommy. Like, he knows that the killer in part 5 wasn't Jason, so there's no reason for him to need to see the dead body.
Yeah.
Like, and why is he like, this was my nightmare? I like, does he have to face the fear of digging up Jason? And just the dumb shit. Like, he stabs the dead body with a piece off of a wrought iron fence, and then lightning strikes, and Jason comes back to life and kills Horseshack from Welcome Back, Hodder.
Exactly. And in the very smallest role. Actually, let me edit myself. This actually is one of my least favorite Jasons, where he's got the fucking gardening gloves and then the utility belt. Like, it's like, I don't fucking get it. Like, the inconsistency of Jason's looks we already talked about is fun. Like, it's cool. Like, it gives each one a distinctive style. But this one, I don't like the gloves. I don't like the stupid belt. It does have some great kills, but I mean, that's pretty much for the first half of the franchise. The kills get lamer, or get more neutered, I will say, at least in the theatrical versions. But yeah, this Jason look is not my favorite. I never understood the gloves thing, and especially the weird, like, and especially why was he buried with that? Doesn't make any sense. But it's got some cool kills. This is what I was going to say earlier. One thing I have to say is that, you know, rewatching all these movies back to back to sort of, like, you know, refresh my memory or just look at them analytically, things start to, like, meld together, or like it starts to become really amorphous and like
oh my god, I can relate to that. I swear to god, like, I've seen these all a million times, but they've never felt like more like one big sticky mass to me in my life.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Especially with my old man post-COVID brain, my memory is dog shit to begin with. But yeah, it's like watching them all back to back was fun and cool, and I've done it a million times. When the Scream Factory set had come out, I remember doing it all back to back, and it was like, oh, that's cool. I never doing that again. And then, of course, for this podcast. But yeah, with that said, you know, the trilogy, the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, you know, it's like I said, a lot of people's favorites.
Yeah, that's 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, 4, 5, and 6 exactly. Where he, you know, little boy Tommy Jarvis, fake Jason fighting Tommy Jarvis, and then the beginning of zombie era Jason Voorhees, which is, we talked about this last podcast as well. It seems like there's these little trilogies or these little tiny like franchises within the franchise itself, whether you're talking about Paramount era versus the New Line era. There's the Jason is a human versus the zombie Jason era. There's, you know, the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. There's all these weird, you know, the fucked up goofy timeline and stuff. So again, these movies get more and more confusing. The more you actually deep dive into them, the more confusing they get.
I think a big part of that is, like we mentioned in the last episode, it took a long time before Friday the 13th was actually directed by a fan.
Yeah.
And I think this is the first time. I think part 6 is the first time. Tom McLaughlin.
Yeah. Which I will say, the one thing that this film gets a lot of points for, and I agree 100%, is that's probably the best looking, the most professional looking. Like, it's shot cinematically. It feels like a bigger budget movie. You know, there's a lot of labor and love put into it to make it look as good as it possibly could for that time on that budget. So, but you can definitely tell that the director wasn't just trying to cash a paycheck. He was a fan. He wanted to make a really good horror movie, and you know,
and he wanted to make a really funny horror movie too. Yeah. Which Kevin Williamson, who's famous for writing Scream, which was obviously in many ways a tribute to exactly this kind of movie. He's gone to Tom McLaughlin and told him that had he not done part 6 the way he did part 6, there wouldn't be a Scream, because the humor inspired him so much. That being said, I think the humor, like in the James Bond opening, oversteps a little bit and starts to become a little too close to parody. But I respect the hell out of his decision to use it. And I think that it was like, when you see somebody doing the right thing just a little ahead of when it became popular to do the right thing, it's like, it's going to be a little clumsy because he's not dealing with a fully formed genre trope at this point, and he's kind of inventing things as he's going along. But you've got Jason doing the James Bond thing. You've got you've got Jason being struck by lightning. You've got the inclusion of Horseshack, like we mentioned. There's a whole scene with paintball enthusiasts, like a corporate retreat,
which is
happens to be a lot of people's favorite scene in the movie.
Yes.
And then you've got the death of Tony Goldwyn in his his film debut, and his wife tries to plead with Jason and offer her purse for her life, and then when she's killed and falls into like the puddle, it looks like an American Express card, but it actually says American Excess on it.
Yes, yep, that's right.
What was
And
your thought on? Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say, like, some of that tongue-in-cheek humor was definitely of the period, especially by part 6. You have to start, and there are people, even though I had mentioned it being most people's favorites, or a very popular favorite, there are still people who hate that the Friday the 13th franchise ever included any humor, that it should have always been closer in tone to the first 3. I think that's silly. I think you're gonna, at that point, just what can you do new? Not all changes or not all experiments were successful or necessary, but I at least appreciate the attempt to do something. But I'm sorry, but you were gonna say?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask what you thought of the fan favorite paintball death sequence.
I love it, and it was one of the moments that really struck me as, first off, I love the like angry misogynist dude. Again, as I mentioned, in the previous film, you have to give the audience people that you want to see die, like that, the fun death. And I will say the one thing that I hate that everybody seems to love for whatever reason, and this goes into the silliness, was the smiley face kill when he bashes him in the tree, and then there's also like, that was, smiley face was carved in the tree before, that wasn't like the impact of the face, which I never really understood what it was trying to say, but I didn't necessarily think that a face indentation into a tree would make a smiley face. I just didn't think, I just thought it was weird. And because if they'd set it up maybe in a different way, but it's a fun scene. All the actors in there are doing really good with their little parts, their little corporate retreat. There's even like the whole thing of like where they're wearing like the dead headbands. It's like there's all these funny things in it that I thought were pretty fun. It is a very fun scene. Like I said, it doesn't work. I don't love everything about it, but it's a fun scene. And I love all the little, like, in such a short period, you have such distinct characters, and they're adding a lot in that small scene that they get.
Yeah, they are making the most of their roles.
Yeah.
I think everybody in here is actually doing a pretty good job acting wise. This is really the only movie, well, kind of in part 2. This is really the only movie where the sheriff in town actually stands out to me as like a memorable character.
Yeah.
And he is like what you're describing, kind of one of these early examples of an antagonist within the greater arc of the story, because he's going against Tommy Jarvis, because Tommy Jarvis is running with his daughter. The sheriff's daughter, Sheriff Garris, I should say, is named after Mick Garris, who I previously mentioned his podcast. But Sheriff Garris's daughter believes Tommy Jarvis is talking about Jason being back, and any sane person would think that this guy was making it up. Like it's the Crazy Ralph thing all over again. Like I get it when characters are like, oh, will you shut up about that? Jason's not real. That's the most realistic part of these movies. And so I actually think Sheriff Garris is a good guy throughout the whole thing. He just happens to be standing in the way of Tommy Jarvis getting the truth out there that Jason really is alive. Yeah. But if I was in Sheriff Garris's position, I would A, not believe Jason was alive, and B, wouldn't want anyone who was talking about Jason being alive hanging out with my teenage daughter.
Yeah.
Just bottom line. So in this particular case, it's kind of an interesting antagonist, and I think it's played well. I think the characters really are kind of where McLaughlin, as the writer director, really does come through for the series. And I think, like we've said before, the humor sometimes doesn't hit the mark exactly, but I admire that it's there. I like that he tried something different, and I think just even a couple years later, same director probably would have perfectly nailed it.
Yeah, I think there's so much about the film that maybe shouldn't work or is kind of goofy but works. If you were a fan of this film franchise and you've gone along this ride, first of all, to an audience who had never seen a Friday the 13th, some of these things might be like the James Bond opening is a perfect example. Like that might be like you might be like, what the fuck is this? But especially in the canon of Friday the 13th, that the little bit of twists on these things or these characters stand out more because you know this franchise, the canon. Things like where the red dot goes, you bang. That shit is stupid, except it's brilliant in this movie. And it's become like one of the most quoted things from this entire franchise. And Deputy Rick is, again, this character in another movie might be hated or annoying, but he's beloved, and this character's beloved because of this, the way it was handled and what it adds to this mythology. It's just one of those things. It's like you never know what's going to work. You can't predict these things, or like, and you might take all these factors, the James Bond opening, the Frankenstein tribute, and in a complete with different actors or different filmmaker, maybe it didn't work. Maybe it was, maybe it killed the franchise, but whatever reason, I think it was because, and from everything I've read, Tom McLaughlin was like beloved. Everybody loved him. Like everybody on set really liked him, which hasn't been said of all the previous filmmakers in the franchise.
Right. First director to have no nudity in the film.
That's right, exactly. Which I've heard people complain about that too. Like that's, in fact, I remember no names given, but somebody I know was saying their one complaint with the movie was the lack of boobs, and I'm like, dude, I'm not 13. First off, I have the internet.
Right.
I don't need that, but I mean, to each their own. While it's not my favorite, like I said, I've gone on record. The final chapter will always be my favorite for a multitude of reasons. My second favorite, which is again a controversial opinion, which I will be talking about soon for totally different reasons, but this is right there in the middle of like one of my favorites. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I like it, and it definitely is one of the stronger entries. I just don't think. I think it's got a cool ending. The whole boat ending and stuff with the on the lake and stuff is really cool. It's very interesting.
I like this Tommy Jarvis better than the last Tommy Jarvis.
Okay, I think that's. I tried to think this weekend. What about? And I get I'm blanking on the actor's name. Jesus Christ. Return of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead Part 2.
Tom Matthews is his name.
Tom Matthews, thank you. I literally was just...
You weren't thinking of it maybe because he's a Tom playing Tommy.
Exactly. I like that actor. Return of the Living Dead is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And I think because I equate him with those characters which have a sense of humor, and Tommy Jarvis has no sense of humor in this. He's not as psychopathic as the previous incarnation of Tommy Jarvis. Or even, in fact, the first genitor. But I don't know, he's so humorless. He's almost a little bland to me, which is probably not fair. I think that might be more my own expectations of, because I love him as, does he also play Tom in Return? God damn it, that's gonna bother me. He plays, I should know, Freddy. It's Freddy. I was gonna say it's an YN, but I should have known that. But yes, he plays Freddy. Maybe because I love him so much as Freddy and in those films, but maybe, I don't know, I'm expecting too much. And again, it's not to say he's bad in it. He's great in it. He's a great lead. And it's interesting, most of these films and most slasher films in general always have a strong female lead. And he's one of the only significant, especially returning male protagonist in these films. And he does a good job. He's just a little bland for me. His incarnate. And again, I cannot forgive the stupidity of his rationale to dig up Jason and then also bring his goddamn mask with him and throw it into the god damn, it's so dumb. But anyways, I think that I honestly believe if it wasn't for the stupidity of the first 5 minutes, it might be in my top 2, but for whatever reason, pacing or whatever, I put it in my top 3. But it's still it's still, if I were to show people who've never seen Friday the 13th, this would be probably the one of the first 2 or 3 that I would show them. So, but it's fine. It's almost not dismissive. It's not fine. It's a good movie. It's good. I'll just leave it at that.
It ranks pretty high for me, and it's a Friday the 13th that has an Alice Cooper song. So as somebody who has an entire playlist of metal and hard rock songs from horror movies, the man behind the mask takes one of the key spots. Alice Cooper. In fact, I have a T-shirt that is literally Alice Cooper and Jason. I think it's a press photo for the music video that they did. But nice.
But yes, it's it's very memorable. But yeah, it's definitely one of the more solid entries in it. It's just I don't have a lot to say about it. Everything I have to say about it is negative, but that's not fair because, like I said, there's a lot good with it. The even like you were saying, the opening sequence or the sequence with the couple that was really, I think that is actually more Scream-like, and self-awareness definitely fucked this franchise up at a certain point. We will get there. But to me, that like scene when she's like, look, I've seen a lot of horror movies. No dude in a mask. It means like, there's all these like things in that scene that really work. They both are really good in their small roles. You know, when she's getting drowned, apparently she did that for real. Like she really, that wasn't like a dummy. The actress really laid face down first in that watery mud. It's a cool scene. There's a lot. I mean, there are cool things about it. Like I said, I love the ending, but I just can't stop talking about how stupid that opening is. Or
tell us how you really feel, James.
What about you, Devin? Though you tell me, I just ranted about it. What are your thoughts?
I kind of feel the same way. Like it does. The beginning doesn't bother me the way it does you, but I would say that I probably rank it about the same as you. Like it's definitely not my number one or my number two. It would probably be more like a 3 or a 4 on my favorites list. But it definitely is on the favorites list. Like it's one of the Friday the 13th I wouldn't necessarily want to live without if I was going to keep, if I had to be selective about which movies I was ever going to see again, part 6 would be on the list.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I enjoy it. And I think that Tom Matthews does a pretty good job as Tommy Jarvis, but I think it was time. Like, I'm glad they didn't try to bring Tommy Jarvis back for part 7. I think the world was kind of getting tired of the mess they had made out of it.
Yes, I agree.
So they went a completely different route for Friday the 13th part 7, A New Blood, taking place in 1988. Let me catch us up on the timeline here. So we didn't mention, okay, so the last one we talked about, Friday the 13th part 6, Jason Lives, came out in 1986, but takes place in 1990. And now we're on Friday the 13th part 7, A New Blood, which came out in 1988, but takes place in 1997. So we're taking quite a jump forward into the future where Jason has been living at the bottom of, or I guess not living, but Jason's body has been at the bottom of Crystal Lake waiting for this psychic girl, Tina, to show up. And this is the one where, there's a lot of firsts and at least one major last that I want to make sure that I mention here in a second too. But this is the one where John Carl Buechler, the film's own director, called it Carrie versus the Terminator.
Yeah.
And people not familiar with John Carl Buechler, he was actually a special effects man for a long time. And I think he remained a special effects man by and large, but occasionally would come out and direct something himself. And he directed the first Troll, which I think at this point, people forget. After Troll 2, the Nilbog story, I think people forget there was ever even a Troll 1.
Yeah.
Troll 2 is so ridiculous, it almost seems like it was named a sequel as a joke. Like Leonard Part 6.
Leonard Part 6. I knew it!
That's so much easier to stomach.
Exactly.
Part 6. And that's before I even knew about Bill Cosby. Leonard Part 6 is just awful.
Trash, yes.
Yeah. But anyways, that's not why we're here to talk. John Carl Buechler did Friday the 13th part 7, A New Blood. And what's great about him coming on this is, it was kind of like a bittersweet thing on this particular movie, because being a special effects man, he really was a fan of the Friday the 13th series, and he wanted to make it as extreme as he could because he knew that's what the fans wanted, because that's what he wanted, and did some incredible special effects, and ultimately ended up with what is considered to be the most heavily censored Friday the 13th movie in the series.
Yeah.
So before I ask what your thoughts on this are, because there's actually quite a bit, oddly enough, to go over on The New Blood if people are interested, but it is a final role for one particular actor. This movie is actually narrated at the opening, which is a first for Friday the 13th. There has always been the recap.
Yeah.
And there have been flashbacks, and there have been dream sequences, and there have been people around the campfire telling the story of 2 summers ago, and it seemed like they used the campfire scene from part 2 in at least 3 or 4 movies. This one opens with straight up narration of a disembodied voice hosting you into the movie. Do you know whose dignified voice that was in his final role, in his final film period?
No.
I'll give you a hint. You're going to Camp Blood, ain't you?
Are you serious?
That is Crazy Ralph giving that very somber.
I did not know that.
Narration. Yes.
I mean, now that I'm thinking of the voice, I can totally actually. It's less crazy, but
that is his name is Walt Gorney, And according to legend, he was a little weird on set, but they think that he was maybe just being a little, a little character act, a little method acting on playing Crazy Ralph in parts 1 and 2. But from everything that everyone knows him says about him, he would have loved the attention that Friday the 13th ultimately ended up getting, and he was proud of it. So
I love it.
Yeah, way to go, Walt Gorney. Way to go, Crazy Ralph. He's literally my favorite of that archetype in any horror movie.
Well, he created it, so. So this is a weird one because it was actually one of the ones I watched a lot as a kid. I think by 87 probably would have been right when I started to really get into horror movies. In fact, I know for a fact that was right around where I was really like every weekend going to rent horror movies. It was probably going to be on TV that year or the next year.
Oh, that remind me after you've said your piece. I got to tell you how I first saw this because I think people will relate to it, and only people of our generation will.
Okay, I can do that. But yeah, I it's become one where people are divided. A lot of people don't like the sort of extra, even though by this point Jason has come back from the dead twice already,
and he's full zombie Jason at this point.
Yeah, they don't like that she has psychic powers. To me, it was cool as a kid because finally you get somebody that can sort of stand up to Jason, and actually, he has his own set of crazy powers. The fact he's almost indestructible, he's definitely stronger than normal people. So I thought it was cool, and actually, I always forget her name, Lynn Park Lincoln. She to me, a lot of the fun, like there's, outside of like Heather Langenkamp and, Jamie Lee Curtis, a lot of times, a lot of these final girls, they become so homogenous. And again, she's another girl next door, pretty blonde girl. Like by no means is her character or like anything about her on paper really stick out outside of the fact that she has psychic powers. But I actually really like even rewatching it, 2 weeks ago, I was really like, man, I really like, well, I have a lot of sympathy for her, and like her whole like story is so stupid that her abusive dad, she used her psychic powers to make the pier crumble and drop him into the lake. Nobody ever tried to save him or like even dig his body up, which is important to the foreshadowing. But I don't know. I always liked it, and this is where I think. And again, you have a special effects director in the role. Finally, we get we've had Jasons in the past with, that kept the hatchet, mark in his mask. But now, finally, we have a Jason that looks like he's come back from the dead. Like he's the back of him, you can see his like spine and stuff, and he looks really raggedy and his shit's all torn up. And when his mask comes off, even though I love the way this Jason looks with his mask off, it is also doesn't look anything like there's no deformity. He's just like a skeletal zombie face kind of, but I still think it's cool, but it pisses me off that like the eyes aren't uneven or whatever. But anyways, that is really nerdy, nitpicky shit, but I really like it. It's not the best movie and it drags. It is, I think it's definitely the one, especially second act really drags for me. The last sequence is cool. Like I really love the last sequence, but I
like the last sequence until the end, and I absolutely hate the end.
Yes, I agree 100%. I hate the end too, but I did like their battle and stuff. But well, yeah. Anyways, how did you first see it?
Well, I'd only remembered this a couple of days ago, and then when you mentioned VHS a minute ago, it brought it back to my head again. Because I used to own this on VHS. I bought it at the video store when it showed up previously viewed. It was, I think, maybe the first Friday the 13th I ever owned on VHS. But the first time I saw it, I was a little bit younger. And this is what I think only people of our generation will remember having grown up with. And our kids will have no fucking idea. I wanted to record a movie that was on at like midnight on Cinemax. And so I set the timer to record, but I didn't know how long the movie was. So I just hit the timer to record and keep going. And this was one of those movies where I had my movie. I can't even remember what movie I was actually trying to record or if I even, but Friday the 13th Part 7 came on after it. So it was an unintentional record. but I remember even flipping out like, I got Friday the 13th part 7. Like,
I love it. Yep. God, that's the thing is though, man, that back in the day, our stacks of VHS copied off of like, it's how I had Invasion USA. It's how I had pretty much like just recording them off HBO or all the pay channels, so you didn't get commercials. Because trying to do the whole thing where you're watching it on network television and then having to pause it while the commercials come on and then unpause it as soon as it comes back, that's a nightmare. God, people do not know how good they have it. But it was a great time. It was a great time. No complaints. But I also have to say, though, the great Terry Kaiser was really where, at this point in the films, where they throw in an extra villain. And so you have the manipulative Terry Kaiser, Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's, if you don't know. But
he's not playing a dead body for long in this one.
No, exactly. But where he is playing this evil manipulative psychiatrist who
Dr. Cruz.
Dr. Cruz. So he's great in it for his small role. But yeah, I thought it's again, this is where we start to see more cannon fodder, people that we want to see. We want to watch Jason kill in a brutal way. Yeah, like I said, it's not. People, it's weird how much hate this movie gets. I think it's the third most hated movie after
I hate the ones we're about to talk about so much more than this.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's not we're going to talk about the ones that are most hated, but I also think for the longest time fans hated A New Beginning more just because it didn't have Voorhees. But like we've said, it's actually not a bad movie. It's actually a pretty fun installment in the franchise. There's some stupid aspects of it. But again, nowhere near the dumbest shit that will ever touch this franchise, which we will talk about. So,
dumb shit ahead. I like that we keep teasing dumb shit ahead.
Oh, very dumb shit happening. Yeah.
Well, part 7 is also monumental because I can't believe we've talked about it this long without saying his name. But this is the first appearance of Kane Hodder as Jason.
Yes, I was waiting for yes, exactly. So, the man most synonymous with this franchise didn't join until the 7th installment, and weirdly was really the Jason in the worst era of Jason, pretty much, or at least the least celebrated era.
Yeah, I find the dichotomy of that to be very interesting.
Yeah, but definitely he is one of the standouts in these films. I mean, every guy who's played Jason outside of part 2, and that's no dig, but even Ari Lohman, who played Baby Jason, at least he was very memorable in his role. But the actor played it wasn't his fault. It was more of the
They hadn't figured Jason out yet in part 2.
Exactly. But C.J. Graham, who was before this, was this hulking guy who brought this weird quietness to Jason. But
Ted
Kane,
White, I think, is my favorite.
What's up?
Ted White is my favorite.
That's what I said on that. Ted White is probably my favorite. I think he looks like Jason. When I close my eyes and think of Jason, he looks like Jason. That iteration of Jason. But Kane brought this level of intensity and menace and this heaving chest, intense breathing thing. And when he doesn't just smash through a door, he fucking blows it he barrels through every single time. So he added a layer of intensity and physicality that I think really stood out to fans. His dedication, honestly, above and beyond probably anybody to touch this franchise. This guy was really about being Jason Voorhees, and he risked himself, especially in this movie, with collapsing fucking roofs on him and going through staircases and almost giving himself a concussion and stuff. Even though he was physically, permanently heavily scarred by a burning accident on local television gone wrong when he was a younger man, he still threw himself into the flame retardant suit and did burning stunts. So
isn't he on fire in this movie for still a Guinness Book of World Records long amount of time for a character to
is it still Guinness?
It was at the time. I think it might still be the longest sustained stuntman firework.
Dude, the one in Freddy vs. Jason, that thing goes on. I think that dude was in there for 18 minutes or something crazy.
Yeah, but by then it was a different. I don't think that the one in Freddy vs. Jason is entirely a practical effect.
Well, it was 100,
Okay,
but
well, we'll
at the
get to
same
that
time
when we
though,
get to that. But
he had like an oxygen tank, and I mean, you know, you had things that I'm sure Kane was just literally just holding his breath. And but yeah, anyways, a great exactly. He Kane Hodder is synonymous with this franchise for a reason, because his fucking Jason.
and it might have been the longest because it was the length of the take.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
they put the other
One
guy
single
out, you know, in between takes, and with Kane, it was just like, no, let's get this once and let's make it long.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I mean, mad props to Kane Hodder. He still to this day, he's very proud of being Jason. And I mean,
you ever hear the story about his mother on the set of this movie?
No, I have not.
He apparently had his mom come visit him, and the costume department made her a custom crew member jacket that said Jason's mom on it. And according to him, she would wear it pretty much every day for the rest of her life, no matter how hot it got outside. And she lived in Sparks, Nevada, which can't be the coolest place to live. But she would wear it proudly everywhere, hoping somebody would say something. And she had Kane give him like leftover autographs from his convention appearances and stuff, so that if anybody did mention it, she had an autograph picture at the ready. He's kind of referred to it as like the most embarrassing thing I've ever loved, which sounds about right. But you know, anyone that can be that proud of their son being Jason has a pretty interesting son. So
absolutely.
And he's also told stories before about being on the set of, I don't know if it was this Friday or if it was another Friday, but there was a kid on the set, and he was taking off the makeup, and the kid saw the actual burns that Kane Hodder has all over his body and started to get very upset. And Kane actually like showed him, like let him touch the scar tissue and be like, see, it doesn't hurt. And like told the kid, you know, people come in different sizes and packages, and people come looking different ways. This is just how I look, you know, and it's not scary and it's not painful. And apparently the kid walked away happy. But hearing stuff like that, like, I love any story that involves like a compassionate, intelligent Jason Voorhees.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like him and Ted White really are like the ones who hear the stories of defending other actors on the set and stuff. And you know, other actors playing Jason, oftentimes you hear stories about, well, they went and sat off by themselves because they didn't think Jason should be fraternizing with the victims, and which I get, but come on, enjoy the movie you're working on.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where I think, you know, he's my size. He's 6'2" something. Like he's not a small guy, and he's, you know, he was you know, didn't look like a wimp or anything, but definitely compared to some of the other, like, you know, CJ Graham and some of the other guys who've played him and throughout the thing, he wasn't the largest guy on screen, but man, he carries himself in a way that he feels like he's 9 feet tall. He feels like because he's so terrifying, and like, you know, the way that he moves is like that of like a panther or something, or like a jungle beast, like an animal, because he's so intent on killing. And that, I think, again, it's such a credit to him that even though he only did 3 of these movies and they weren't the most profitable of these movies, he's left such a legacy and such an indelible mark on the films because of everything he put into the role. So
he did 4, not 3.
Did he do 4? He
7,
did
8, 9, and 10. Yeah.
Wait. I think I'm miscounting. Am I miscounting? See, I thought it was this one. The next one. Did he do him in Jason Goes to Hell?
Yeah, that's how I met Kane Hodder. He was promoting Jason Goes to Hell.
I thought it was a different guy in the suit, because he's only in it for like 5 minutes.
No, remember, he even cameos.
That's the thing. Like, oh, that's right. He plays the security guard or the cop or whatever.
And then he plays Jason for the huge wrestling match ending.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes. Okay. Fuck, I completely forgot that. Okay. So he played anyways for 4, but once again, not the most beloved films in this franchise. But we will get more into that. But yeah, like it's a fun flick. As we finish talking about A New Blood, it's a fun flick. I like it. I enjoy it rewatching it. Is it the most memorable? Is it the, you know, best in the franchise? No, but I definitely think it's a fun entry into the franchise. To me, New Blood and Jason Lives, I think they're pretty much on equal footing. Like, they've got good things, they've got bad things. I enjoy them both equally. I know some people think that's sacrilegious, but, you know, to each their own.
I'm inclined to agree with you, though. I might give a little bit more of an edge to part six. I think
Yeah, me too, probably.
Part six is a little bit more courageous by adding the comedy to such a straightforward slasher series at that point. Whereas part seven was trying to return to form a little bit. The only addition was really the supernatural, but arguably six brought the supernatural in to begin with.
So,
but seven had, I think, the coolest what could have been kills, including the sleeping bag. Or
oh my god, that's the thing I most wanted to. And again, we've talked about this in the preview. Like, the thing I mainly want to talk about is the kills, and I think that goes on pretty much everybody's top two or top three, and for a lot of people, it's their number one kill, the sleeping bag. And I do think it's, as Kane Hodder himself has said, it's a rare case of the edited version actually is the one instance where it actually is probably better than the unedited version, because in the actual, in the filming of it, he picks up the sleeping bag and smashes against the tree. That's the kill we're talking about, and he does it like 7 times, and it's more gratuitous. But with it doing it once, it's almost makes it more special. He hits her picks her up in the sleeping bag and hits her so hard against the tree. That's all he needs. But yeah, one of the greatest kills. And again, it's a franchise known for amazing kills. Probably the all-time coolest.
Right. And the other one that got trimmed really badly was the death of Dr. Cruz, because speaking again of the antagonist of the story, Dr. Cruz was just weird and creepy, and at any point I kept on feeling like he was going to say, "Oh please, doctor is so informal, call me daddy." But yeah, you knew that he was going to get it bad, because when he starts to get chased by Jason for the first time, he's with Tina's mother, and he literally like holds the mother in front of him, like, here you go, take her and I'll run. So you see that he's absolutely a coward, and you want him to really get it. And then Jason shows up. I don't know where Jason happened to get this, but it was a gas-powered branch cutter is what I would assume it is. It's like a chain or it's a circular saw on a long stick. So so that you can reach up and cut branches up at the really tall tree. And he brings that shit down on Dr. Cruz, and we get a half a second in the final movie. But Dr. Cruz, let me tell you, if you ever get the discs, it's there. I think I may have
come a spilling.
Exactly. I may have been in attendance the first time any of those unedited kills were ever shown. I don't know how long they were making the rounds, but the first time I saw them was in 1993 at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors convention. In fact, the first one I ever went to, I was still in junior high. And we'll get more into the movie they were publicizing when we get there, but Kane Hodder was there, and he brought with him the tape of the unreleased kills, which John Carl Buechler had kept. I think because he was an effects man and he was damn proud of his effects.
Yeah.
And he showed it was all on scratchy VHS being projected on, a convention screen of the extended sleeping bag kill and the Dr. Cruz's fate, and the head getting crushed and the eyeball popping out, and all these various deaths from part 7 that could have been and should have been so much better, and were so much better in their original incarnation if the MPAA hadn't have been trying to make an example of the Friday the 13th movies at that point. And John Carl Buechler, the director, was very outspoken about it, and he actually had what I think was probably the most eloquent argument against cutting a horror film that I've ever heard, for gore, that is. And there are times where you don't want to see a kid get disemboweled, like, I'm not saying that there's not a line, and I'm not saying that line shouldn't be like skirted or crossed occasionally. But in reference to this one, he basically compared it to telling a joke. He says, it's imagine that you have this big long setup for a joke, and then you walk away at the punchline. And that's what was going on with Friday the 13th series up to that point, and a little beyond. It's actually in part 8 as well.
Yeah, very, very much in part 8, yes.
Yeah. But what they were doing was the filmmakers were being allowed to set up the joke, but then they weren't allowed to deliver the punchline. And then a lot of the general public was blaming the filmmakers for not being able to tell the punchline when the punchline was literally taken away from them. So I've always liked that as
that's a great analogy. Yeah,
I like the perfect analogy for cutting gore.
Yeah, it's a film franchise that we all know as an audience what we're there for. And horror fan, we're not nobody who's seeing Friday the 13th film, or 99.9999% of people aren't envisioning themselves ever recreating the violence, ever imagining them, using a power tree limb cutter to cut open a psychiatrist's tummy. It's just not a thing. It doesn't happen. So, and then I think the movie they got 7 cuts and it still kept getting an X rating. So,
wait,
or was
I
that
can't
part
get.
8?
No, that was about right. But I can't get. Did you just say the psychiatrist's tummy?
Yeah, I did say tummy.
Okay, I don't know why that strikes me as funny, but
I don't. Yeah, it's funny that you say that. As soon as I said it, I was like, God, that's the father in me. Grown man using the word tummy.
No, it's not the problem with the word tummy. I'll say my tummy hurts, but I won't say. And then he took the long tree branch cutter and cut across his tummy.
His tummy. That word really is very jarring in that sentence. Admittedly, yes. Anyways,
that's part of why I love you.
So after the part 7 comes one of the most notorious entries into this film franchise.
Jason Takes a Little Vacation.
Jason Takes Manhattan. This is my second favorite film.
I know this about you, yes.
And I know that is very controversial. And yes, I know there are some next level stupid decisions that went into making this movie and the writing and creation of this movie. And I've heard all the criticisms. With that said, I love this fucking movie. I love the fact they did something different and they took it out of Crystal Lake. I love seeing Jason interact in a completely different, a populated environment. The humor in this movie, I think, is fucking brilliant, even if people don't agree. Even if Kane Hodder himself doesn't agree. I fucking enjoy this movie. Yes, the ending. So, we didn't really touch on the fucking stupidity of the part 7 or part 6 ending with her fucking father reanimated corpse.
Yes, part 7.
God. Part 7, one of the dumbest endings in film history. And I guess they did film a sequence where he was at least looked like a corpse and not just like, hey, I'm your dad. I'm your wet dad. Come back to life, which again, telepathy can't reanimate corpses. That's not a thing. So you're already stretching the rules of your movie, but it's just so dumb. As a kid, I liked it. As a kid, I thought it was cool. As a grown man, it's infuriatingly stupid. I'm assuming you feel. In fact, you did say, yeah, you hate the end. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. But it's the only ending that's dumber than that is this ending.
You may have a point.
No, I love the movie.
There are things to love there. I will give you that. It's not near my top, but I don't think I would react to you saying that the way a lot of Friday fans might.
Yeah, I think, but number one, to me, it's the most like ice cream, Pop-Tart. It's the most just junk food snack. It's so goddamn dumb that my brain turns off completely and I just enjoy it for its absurdity. But there's also I love seeing, I guess in one thing, admittedly, I have some weird love of seedy, gross, scary, crime-ridden New York, in that from the 70s on, before the Disneyfying of Times Square and everything, and the really update that New York experienced in the early 90s. I love that era of New York. I wouldn't want to live there at the time, but I have romanticized it, and films of the 70s and early 80s that really, focused movies like, The Exterminator and all these movies that really showcased how dirty and violent New York was. So there's a little bit of that. It's just so dumb. And how do you get from a lake to what channel? It's impossible.
The science behind it, if you can say such a thing. Yeah, you're exactly right. How the hell did they get on a boat in Crystal Lake for their graduation party and end up taking the boat to New York City? I just want to know. I want to hear someone involved with the film try to explain it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they can, but it will be really damned entertaining to hear them try.
Yes.
Most likely you'll just hear them say, yeah, I know we fucked up.
Yeah, and it is definitely a scenario where I didn't think about it as a kid. Like, it never dawned on me as a kid to question that. But as an adult, you're like, wait a second. Like, I might have even thought about it as a kid, but you just assume that they're adults, they know what they're doing, which is always the worst thing that you can think. But it's one of those cases where I know it's stupid, but it's got so many highlights. First off, I'll admit, until they get to New York, which is, most of it looks like it was fucking filmed in a sound stage.
It was Vancouver. The cast called it Jason Takes Vancouver.
Vancouver, which everything is filmed in Vancouver. But like everything on the boat does take a while. I do like the whole the girl playing the guitar, that like there's so many I think cool and memorable moments. I hate
the kid breaking his glasses and having to use his video camera to be able to see far distances. I thought was a really good idea.
There's like I said, there's some meat on the bones there that I think people don't appreciate. But where it really kicks into me, it's once they all swim ashore to quote unquote Manhattan.
So to be fair, some of it was done in Manhattan.
That's the thing is they were smart enough to use 2 or 3 establishing shots. The very famous shot of Jason on the standing there with the New York skyline behind him and all the neon. They very smartly gave us some really memorable actual New York establishing shots, so the rest of it could be filmed on just wherever. Once Jason actually shows up, the movie to me is just the fucking funnest. I think that's why I love it. It's the funnest entry in the entire franchise for me. Watching Jason kick fucking smash punk rockers boom boxes and push people over in the subway and on the fucking escalators. If you can't enjoy that, I don't know what to tell you. You're watching the wrong film franchise. The sequence with Julius is my favorite scene in the entire. Me and my twin brother would talk about this constantly. That you always wanted to see somebody try to actually fight Jason, not just run, but stand there and try to fight. And Julius, who's this young boxer, and he's they get up on this rooftop, which I guess apparently was actually supposed to be filmed in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
But for obvious reasons, they couldn't afford that. But, Julius is on the fucking rooftop and he's bringing it to Jason. And, the story behind filming is that Kane was all he was suited up and, he had, some padding on, but he told the actor playing Julius, just go for it. Really punch. Let's make this look really good. And they really did. But the whole scene, he's punching. You're like, oh my God, this guy's actually kind of fighting Jason. And then Jason sort of just plays rope-a-dope and lets him sort of box himself out, has no more energy left. And then he tells Jason to take his best shot and boom, Jason punches his fucking head off. It goes off the fucking roof, hits the lid of the dumpster, falls in the dumpster, closes. I laughed for 30 hours when as a kid, and I rented that movie and saw it for the first time. It was the greatest thing I ever saw. Now they admittedly, one of the things that fucking irritates me even talking about it is the inconsistencies with Jason's makeup has always bothered me, but even more than that, this film. Okay, there's always I don't know if they're supposed to be fever dreams or whatever, but the final girl in this, and I'm blanking on her character's name, Rennie. She sees drowning Jason, but he's a normal kid in some shots. He's just, and first off, he has hair, which. Why they decide in this film to give little boy Jason hair when he's never had hair in any of the movies drives me fucking crazy. But the ending of the movie, so he's killed by toxic waste. People hated that. I thought that was cool as fuck as a kid. I was like, dude, first off, this is the era of the Toxic Avenger and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Toxic waste is cool, man. And sure, he's in New York, might as well kill him with toxic waste. What isn't cool is the fucking inane stupidity of him not only does he transform back into a little boy, which already doesn't make a fucking lick of sense, but he transforms into a little boy who all of a sudden is where it has little shorts on, and then he's also a little boy with fucking hair, and then he's just a normal looking little boy, which doesn't make any fucking sense. It drives me, but that's the only thing about this movie that makes me hate the movie. It's infuriating.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. The ending is really pretty unforgivable, and the way that Jason looks under the mask in this one is pretty dumb.
Oh,
I heard a
terrible.
podcast the other day, and I've been trying so hard not to like quote this other podcast. It's with Gorley and Rust is the podcast, and this particular series was in Voorhees We Trust with Gorley and Rust, and they did every episode or every movie as its own episode. And I tried not to listen to it too much because I didn't want to be too influenced. But one of the things he said about the end of part 8 that I just stuck in my head and I'll never be able to unsee is apparently toxic waste makes you look like Frankenberry.
Dead on. Exactly. It was for the teeth. Perfect. God, it's so stupid. The special effects are terrible when he's like melting. But you know the original ending of the movie. You know about it, right?
Tell me, I'm not sure I do.
It's the same ending, but when there's a close-up of Jason's mouth, his stupid Frankenberry face, and baby Jason is in his mouth. Like there's like a 2-inch version of baby Jason coming out of his mouth.
What?
Which makes even less sense. It makes I have no idea what the rationale is there. So as terrible and as stupid as the ending is, somehow it could have been worse.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And you can actually find footage of it, and it looks fucking ridiculous.
Speaking of finding footage, before we leave Manhattan here, this was also the one, I can't remember if we mentioned this in the 1989 episode, because this movie came out in 1989. To promote this was the one where Kane Hodder went dressed as Jason and appeared as a guest on the Arsenio Hall show.
Yep, that's right.
Which Arsenio looks so uncomfortable next to him, and from what I understand, and again, who knows? This is internet research. I didn't talk to Kane Hodder or Arsenio Hall about this, but in Arsenio's mind, the idea would be that the joke would be that Jason would come out looking like he was stalking the crowd, and then sit down and carry on like a perfectly reasonable conversation. That, the joke being that he was quite intellectual or whatever.
The real Jason was exactly, yeah.
And I don't know if it was Kane Hodder's idea or what, but it was just like, no, Jason doesn't talk. And so the bit was reduced to Arsenio trying to talk at Jason.
It's very uncomfortable.
To me, it's like what an awful improv partner. That's like when you're doing really great improv with somebody where you're like, oh, look, here we are today at the zoo. What are we going to do at the zoo? Oh, what are we going to the zoo for? Like, it's like, no, you got to play off of him. The stares aren't going to be playing off of him. I get why they thought that was funny, why Kane Hodder at least would think that was funny, because it was all about that character being serious. But the better joke would have been Jason sits down and starts having an intellectual conversation. And I think you can tell on Arsenio's face, this is not going the way I wanted.
Yeah, and it's it's funny, and I remember seeing it at the time and thinking it was funny, and it's funny in its own right, but it's very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, I taped it. I made all my friends come over and watch it. When it was brand spanking new. But yeah, looking at it on YouTube again, like it's a really awkward clip, but it's worth seeing. Right now, I'm kind of excited to talk about what comes next, because this was the point where at this point Paramount was no longer making the money that they were off of the series.
Yep.
And New Line had approached them as far back as part 7 about the concept of Freddy meeting Jason. And so the two sides, Paramount and New Line Cinema, had never really been able to like come to an agreement. And then finally with Friday the 13th part 8 being pretty dismally received, Paramount was finally in a place where they were like, you know what, do your worst. Here's Jason. And they licensed Jason to New Line Cinema. And the reason why I word it that way is because they did not license the title Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
They did not license any of the backstory or any of the back movies, I should say. Some of the backstory comes through, obviously, or you wouldn't have Jason and Pamela. But anyways, New Line Cinema, it was now on them to do Freddy versus Jason. And that stopped and started so many times. We'll get into that when we finally get into that. But their first effort came out in 1993, which was the longest chunk we had ever gone without a Friday the 13th, 1989 to 1993. And it was Adam Marcus's Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. Do you want to try to set this one up, or how do you explain this movie?
So, first off, there's a little bit of nepotism involved with this because first-time feature director happened to be, I don't know if he was best friends, but he was friends with Sean Cunningham's son for decades. I think Cunningham sold a script he wrote to Disney, I think something along those lines. And so if you've seen this movie, you know what's about the roasting that's about to come. And I feel like there are some I think I don't want to go off on I am literally 5 seconds from going off on a full-blown rant, but
well, I'll say this before you start it, because okay. I think this is probably the nicest thing that'll be said about it. I think it would still be a cult classic if it was about anybody but Jason. If it was a brand new character that was even inspired by Jason, this is one of those early 90s lost cult classic type material. The fact that it's Jason makes what you're about to say all the more necessary, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so he decided in this film to add a bunch of new aspects to the mythology and really go balls to the wall, go all out, and really try to fucking, I don't know, make it more exciting. I will say a few years ago, I watched, I don't know if it was like a mini documentary. I don't know where I watched it. I was actually trying to find it recently for this, and I couldn't find it. But I remember this whole, maybe it was it Behind the Darkness? I somewhere I watched this thing within the last few years of the director sort of explaining himself and explaining his motivation and defending the film that exists as we know it.
It might have been Crystal Lake Memories. I haven't gotten to the Jason Goes to Hell segment yet.
It might have been. That's what I'm saying. I can't remember. But look, he added a bunch of goofy shit to the mythology. Some of it works in its own right. Some of it definitely doesn't work. But I think the other thing that was sort of egregious was that he decided to play in other people's sandboxes and add a bunch of shit to the mythology that on one hand, I think part of me goes, oh, that's cool. But another part of me thinks, well, first off, that's real presumptuous of you. And like, I'm trying to not give spoilers away right away, but so to recap the movie as best as I can. So the beginning of the movie, it really opens like any fucking Friday the 13th. There's a girl gets nude. She's in a cabin. She runs from Jason. You know, she's running in her little bath towel that I don't know if it's glued on her, but it never falls. And surprise, she's actually undercover FBI or some shit. And there are all these like floodlights come on and a bunch of armed military dudes just blow Jason away. And that's how we open, with Jason being murdered by this military unit. And then we proceed to find out all this fucking insane new mythology that Jason's spirit can possess other people's bodies, that Jason's fucking, his evil essence is a little worm creature thing. I'm blanking on the actor. He is a great character actor. He has
the one that played Duke, or the one that plays
that plays Creighton Duke. One of the goofiest
Stephen Williams. Yeah.
Stephen Williams. Yeah, he has a very common name, but he's a great character actor. He's probably the highlight of the movie, even though his character is so fucking over the top and it's so stupid.
Character is ridiculous, and he's easily the best part of the movie.
Yeah, he at least makes it fun.
He wouldn't apparently he refused to do the movie unless he could dress like a cowboy. So that's all him. Yeah, which again, it's so stupid, but it works. But he somehow has all this and Jason has a fucking sister that yeah. So it adds all this shit. I hate the way Jason looks. The special effects in this movie are phenomenal, and the uncut gore is amazing. That is the best thing I can say about the movie. Yeah, props to whoever did the effects on this.
It was K&B. So, yeah, so that's why. Even though I don't like the look of Jason, it's so... I'm still hoping that NECA releases a figure in it so that I can finally finish the different iterations of Jason that have been on. Oh, we also need a Jason X, which I better fucking get at some point. If I don't get a Jason X, I will be so pissed. The most toyetic Jason of all time, and I can't get a goddamn toy. That's a different podcast. But anyways, it's so goddamn dumb. And I think the most egregious thing in the whole fucking movie is that the director, who, say what you will, has decided to canonically, from his point of view, it's canon, state that Jason is a part of the Evil Dead universe, and he is a deadite at the end, I guess. I mean, I don't know the exact explanation, but he is part of the Evil Dead franchise. And look, man, unless fucking Sam Raimi agrees with that or says it's true, fuck you. Don't claim that just to get your extra nerd cred. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but it does.
Because it's really presumptuous, and it was this was the first Friday the 13th that I saw in the theater. And even that's a misstatement, because it wasn't a Friday the 13th, and it was painfully obvious that it wasn't a Friday the 13th.
Yep.
But this was the first Jason movie where I got to see it in the theater. I was 14 when it came out. I said I'd gone to my first Fangoria convention. I'd only seen a handful of Jason movies at that point. But going to this Fangoria convention and meeting Kane Hodder and getting him to sign, I still have a signed hockey mask from him.
That's amazing.
And Adam Marcus was there as well. And not knowing anything about what kind of dude he was behind the scenes or whatever, or anything about him, like, to a 14-year-old, like, that was the coolest shit in the world. This guy did the new Friday the 13th, and he's here to promote it. So nobody knows how shitty it is yet. And he even showed us a sneak preview of the first 8 minutes where where Jason gets blown to bits by the FBI or whatever, and was like, and that's how the movie starts, and everybody just rips into applause, because we had no idea that was the last time we were going to see Jason for another like 2 hours.
Exactly, and another 75 minutes.
Right. So during that summer, in anticipation of Friday, August 13th, the release of Jason Goes to Hell, I had my first summer job. I was mowing lawns, and I went through and I watched every single Friday the 13th movie. And it was the first time I ever went in order, but it was on the level of like one a week. I would either buy it or rent it as the summer went along, in anticipation of like knowing all the backstory before I got to Jason Goes to Hell. Cause that was, in my mind, that was going to be important to know all the backstory. It was not. And I will say that 14-year-old me loved Jason Goes to Hell, but it was also an early lesson in don't be tricked by meeting people at conventions into thinking that their movie's any good.
Yeah. I've learned that lesson a few times, actually.
Yeah. It's really bad. But yeah, to this day, like, the smell of freshly cut grass will make me think of Friday the 13th movies because of that summer. And working to like go out and to Kmart, which doesn't exist anymore, and start collecting. One of my first completist journeys was to have all the Friday the 13th. And there was
I feel you, man.
at that point, yeah. So, and I don't think I ever got all 8 on VHS. I didn't get all 8 until DVD. But yeah, that was my experience going into Jason Goes to Hell and wanting to love it so much that I did love it. Yeah. Kind of a little bit of Phantom Menace syndrome, we should call that.
I've done that many times.
But yeah,
convince yourself it's not bad. It's pretty good, and then reality hits. And
yeah, it has become one of my least watched movies in the series because it's almost painful to watch. I love Leslie Jordan's part in it. I always liked some of the diner stuff, but
yeah, I mean that's one of the more interesting. The diner lady and her, is it her son?
No, I think it's her husband.
But he just looks like he's like 20 years younger than.
Well, it's
her husband.
It was written to be the reverse.
Yeah, I was gonna say like.
And Leslie Jordan shows up on the set, and is so Leslie Jordan that they're just like, no, we're gonna have to make the woman the more dominant personality here. Which
works. I mean, and that makes it memorable. And
part of why I don't know how much I like the wife, but I like Leslie Jordan's, what does he call her? Pookie or Snookums or something like that. But yeah, my first exposure to Leslie Jordan and
little tiny Leslie Jordan. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's so fucking ridiculous and stupid. And I will say this. Unlike the fucking Halloween where you learn that Michael is the Irish whatever. Anyways,
yeah, that's part 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Yeah.
Unlike that one, I guess that one also, it's got little young Paul Rudd, so it's got its own thing. But anyways, this one is so bad shit. At least it's kind of fun to watch if you can just forget like how stupid these additions to the Jason mythology is. But now you made a really great point that if this was a different, if it was, even if it had a killer at the beginning, in fact, if it had done that, if it was like, even like you think it opens with like a mass killer and you think it's going to be one of those movies and then it turns into the movie, it probably would be considered a classic. I think you're actually dead on right with that assessment because it is so crazy. And again, the K&B special effects are fucking great. Even the stupid little slug creature thing that is like the evil Jason's, whatever the essence of Jason, it's so stupid, but it's a cool effect or whatever. And dude, this is the other thing that bothers me. So, and then the whole thing with Jason's fucking sister, so stupid. And the whole thing of like, oh, if you kill a Voorhees, then if he possesses the body of a Voorhees, even if that Voorhees is dead, Jason will come back to life. And he comes back to life looking exactly like how he, instead of like coming back to life is like he's like wearing this, it's just so stupid.
He comes back as zombie Jason.
Yeah, how he looked like at the beginning of the movie, which is like, what? Like that.
And it was super crass the way Erin Gray, yes. Character actress Erin Gray, who most people know,
legendary actor,
yeah, from the Buck Rogers series. She plays Jason's sister in this, and she's wiped out really early on, which you realize now was kind of merciful. But at the time, I remember thinking like, wow, I can't believe they let, sitting from the perspective of being 14 years old in 1993, wow, I can't believe they let that big of a star die towards the beginning. but yeah, that's Jason's vessel to becoming Jason again. And the shot, I'm just going to say the shot between her legs in the uncut version was not Erin Gray. Erin Gray does not appear. She does not appear in the movie past the point of the character's death. So her body is brought back into the movie in like desperate rewrites. So you actually never see the face of the body. You just know that the body's there. So once you know all these things, it's like you can't unsee it. You start to really see how this thing started to come apart. They had to reshoot so much stuff that they added that bit about Jason's sister being down in the basement, and they added the whole bit of the love affair between Jason's niece and the like Maury Povich sort of wannabe Wayne Gale true crime reporter. That character existed before, but he wasn't a major like there wasn't a love interest element. And do you know anything about why this movie had to be reshot so extensively?
Go ahead and tell me.
Well, this was the big return of Sean S. Cunningham to the series, as you had pointed out before. And Cunningham gave the role of writer-director to his son's friend, who had talked him into, I think there's actually a quote here. Let me see if I can find this quote. This is actually a quote from Sean Cunningham, paraphrasing Adam Marcus. Adam came to me and said, "The last thing the fans want to see is Jason going through Camp Crystal Lake chopping up teenagers again." Of course, it was the only thing they wanted to see, and Adam delivered this movie that was so not good. That's Sean Cunningham's appraisal of it. Nobody was watching dailies.
Interesting.
And, yeah, they found far too late to do anything about it because they were too focused on moving on to the next shot. The scene at the diner had been shot entirely in nonstop slow motion. So it was an 8-minute slow motion action sequence at the diner. And apparently every character in the story, no matter how inane, had like a long conversation about Jason. There was a bunch of talk that had to be cut out. And apparently Adam Marcus also didn't understand actors, which makes a little bit of sense as you watch the movie. But yeah, apparently like when the director has to get another take from an actor because the actor isn't quite hitting the point, especially in a transition of emotions in a scene, which is going to happen a lot in a horror movie because you're going to go from laughing to crying to screaming so much in a horror movie. He would give direction, but then he would get impatient with how long it would take an actor to switch emotions. And so what he started to do was he started to film it at this wrong speed so that he could make the actors appear as if they were transitioning their emotions faster. Like rather than ask them like, hey, can you slow that down for me a little, or can you speed that up for me a little bit? He just naturally assumed his actors weren't capable of it, and that the solution to this would be to speed it up. And there's still shots in the movie where you can tell that it's been kind of fast forwarded a bit.
Sped up.
And I don't know
That's
how
the single
much
goddamn dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
So
It makes so much sense though.
Sean Cunningham says that he had to come back and direct himself roughly 43 minutes of footage because what Adam had shot was so unusable. So for this length of a movie, that's roughly half the movie.
I was gonna say like about roughly half the movie.
Yeah,
a little bit less or whatever. But good Lord.
And then on top of that, there's stories about Adam Marcus getting upset at actors who didn't want to do nude scenes, and which is never a good look on anybody. And it doesn't seem like it was a happy set. And Aaron Gray in terms of that scene, if you've seen the uncut version, when Jason is reborn, he is reborn through entry, and he gets into his sister's body in a very crass way, let's say. And Aaron Gray did not know that was going to be in the movie because that was all reshoots. So Aaron Gray to this day won't watch the movie, and she's furious about it because she never would have agreed to doing the movie if that was the way they were going to film that scene.
Yeah.
So that's just scummy in and of itself. It's also oddly enough, his whole theory of the audience doesn't want to see what they've seen before, because he also makes the only Friday the 13th movie, or the only Jason movie, where there's no scenes of Jason unmasked.
Yep. Well, and that decision to aesthetically it's cool. Like I get the idea that the mask has become part of his face, like the skin is starting to heal over it. I mean, that's cool on one degree, but it's also fucking stupid. And I'm sure Kane Hodder would have enjoyed having a mask he could actually take off instead of a big fucking prosthetic that covered his whole goddamn face.
Yeah, he was stuck in that thing all day now.
And the lumpy head, and again, K&B did great, like all the other effects and everything, but the design of Jason was but it didn't work. I think it could have worked maybe in a different way, but yeah, no Jason face, although maybe it would have been like a fucking little worm. Who knows what kind of stupidity we could have seen, but it's so dumb. It's dumb. I almost enjoy how stupid it is because it's like it stands out so much like a sore thumb from the rest of the it's insane that the movie where Jason goes to fucking space feels more like a Friday the 13th movie. The film does have one cool aspect of it, with the very first fan service of its kind that I can remember. No, I guess Predator 2 probably would have beat this. Well, was Predator 2 88 or was it 8?
No, Predator 2 was, I want to say, was like 91, wasn't it? I mean, it came out before this movie, but
that's what I'm going to say. Okay, yeah. So then the alien skull in Predator 2 would have been the first of its kind, the real fan service. But the ending of this movie...
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we all wanted to see. Rumor mills, even as a kid before, even if you didn't read Fangoria, but well before the internet, everybody talked about, wouldn't it be cool to see Freddy versus Jason? Or everybody wanted Michael Myers, but Michael Myers is too much of a pussy. No, I'm just kidding. But the ending where, you see Jason's mask, he's in the dirt. All of a sudden, Freddy's claw comes out and pulls the mask into the dirt. Famously played, the gloved hand was Kane Hodder. So he's the only person ever played Jason and Freddy.
Quite the distinction, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, poor Jackie Earle Haley. He was not the problem with the poor Elm Street remake. He was fine in it. It's not his fault that the entire movie was just mishandled and poorly done. I thought his creepy Freddy worked for what it was. But anyways, yeah, the movie ended because they had been trying to get that film together. In fact, from the Jason Goes to Hell was really only made, from my understanding, the reason it was greenlit to be made was just they wanted to keep Jason's out in the popular consciousness so that they could eventually make Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, they had just done Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, and so now they were doing Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. So they were intended to be companion pieces, even though they literally have nothing to do with one another outside of Freddy's glove is in both.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this brings us to, which I think for the longest time was the most maligned film in the series that I feel like definitely doesn't deserve it. Not a good movie. I will go on record and say it's not a good movie, but there's a lot of coolness amongst the bad parts, and that is Jason X. It's a weird fucking movie, man. It's David
really
Cronenberg as a character. David Cronenberg is an actor playing a character in it, but it's so weird. The man's only. It's just so weird. Basically, in the future, we've had to the Earth is destroyed, so they've. I don't know. I honestly, I didn't rewatch it, so I don't remember all the details. But basically, like, it's the future. We're trying to, I think, populate a new Earth because we ruined the old Earth, if I'm not mistaken. Do the plot points really matter in Jason X? I'm going to go on record and say I don't think they do. Anyways, long story short, Jason winds up in the future. He's in a cryo chamber on the ship. His body is getting examined or whatever. It's Jason in space. He's literally
cryogenically frozen in 2010, the futuristic world of 2010
That's right.
From when the movie was shot in 2000, that released in 2002. But it's what I thought was funny. He's brought to the future by being cryogenically frozen, along with his last victim before he's frozen,
right. Yeah.
who is not in any kind of a tube, and really kind of just goes to prove that like all the technology surrounding cryo freezing was pointless and lame, and that all you just needed was cold to do the trick. And because she survives just fine, like she's in better shape than Jason, although she hasn't been, hatcheted in the face multiple times and all this other stuff. But they needed a heroine to wake up like Ripley.
Yeah.
And that's really what this is. This is every one of the director's favorite science fiction movies versus Jason.
Yeah. And very obviously, this is post-Buffy, self-aware, snarky dialogue.
It's actually really unlikable.
Very unlikable.
It's aged horribly. Like, I laughed when I saw it in the theater in 2002. Like, aha, they get it. They know that they're making a bad movie. Now it's just like, no, why didn't you try to make this into a good movie? Why do you have to make a bad movie so that you can point out how bad it is?
Yeah, it's and also, if like, this is by no means a defense of Joss Whedon as a human being, but Joss Whedon was a smart writer. He wrote intelligent, funny dialogue. His characters could get away with it because, one, they were well written, which is first and foremost the most important, but two, he wrote likable characters who said snarky, self-aware shit. And that's very postmodern and very popular at the time. Very Kevin Williamson, very post-Scream. Unfortunately, when you are not as talented as those writers and those creators, it just comes off awful and populated by actors, no offense to the cast, but by a bunch of lesser talents. When David Cronenberg is the best actor in your movie, well, that's not true. Peter Mensah, who I love as a character actor, very famously for playing lots of fucking gladiator types. I love him. I always wanted him to be the live action Martian Manhunter. I just think he's so cool. And his character in this is cool, but he's also fucking annoying. They all have
these dumb lines like, that's not going to kill me. That ought to do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't remember the exact line, but yeah. Oh, that will do it, or that's gonna do whatever. It's so fucking stupid, but
this sucks on so many levels. Like,
yeah,
making quips before you're about to die, just fucking die.
Yeah. Oh, what happened to Sergeant? Whatever the character's name. He's screwed. Oh god damn! This is like some fucking. Batman and Robin, Batman Forever level fucking eye roll. Like,
but dude, seriously, all the quips. First off, the quips don't really work so well anymore in a modern environment, anyways. But at the height of quips, the Arnold Schwarzenegger type quip, it only works when the person who delivers the beating or kills the other person, they get to make the quip.
Yeah,
the person dying doesn't get to make the quip.
Exactly.
The person dying gets to say, help me.
Yes, exactly.
And not try to suddenly turn something into a tragically clever death.
Okay. Exactly. You nailed it. And the thing is, like, yeah, that's hard to do when the killer is the very famously mute Jason Voorhees. But then just don't do it. Just don't take that approach. They're just trying to ride the fucking the wave of what was popular at the time. That's number one. Number two, they tried way too much for a budget that they had, which at $13 million, in 19, whatever year this came out,
It came out in 2002 and was shot in 2000.
Yeah. Even by that time, it's not a great budget, but the movie looks worse than a modern like Sci-Fi Channel original film, which is
amen.
It's lit fucking terribly. It's all of the sci-fi at this era, especially like straight to video sci-fi, has the same. It's too bright. It's so fucking bad. The movie looks terrible. They have all these like fucking badass soldiers. That's like Peter Mensah plays like the sergeant. He's like the head of them. But they look like bad cosplay. It's so bad. Now, there's a lot bad about it. The fucking terrible dialogue, the terrible writing. But number one, kills in there. There's some fucking great kills. The liquid nitrogen, which
that is one of the top 5 kills of the whole series. Is the liquid?
Yeah, nitrogen. Agreed. It's not. They like. I guess famously, MythBusters just disproved that it would happen. Who gives a shit? It was cool as fuck. One of not only was it just this cool and original kill, but the actual effects work were so well done and so believable that it's almost hard to watch a little bit. Like it's so
you feel bad for her, and
yeah, absolutely.
This is post feeling bad for the victims in Jason movies.
That's right.
But you feel bad for that death.
Now, one of the cooler sequences happens later on when he's in like in a VR reality, and it's like it sucks because the kill doesn't really count because they're not real people. That's a morbid thing to say, but he kills 2 people in this virtual thing. But it's an homage to the sleeping bag kill. But I actually like this one more because he's actually using one girl in a fucking sleeping bag to kill another girl in a sleeping bag. I just thought that really just took it up to another level. But my thing I will say is the look of when Jason becomes Jason X, when he becomes a suit like the Uber Jason, it's so comic booky. It just works for me. And the guy who designed it fucking designed RoboCop. So
I didn't know it was the same guy.
Yeah, he did all the molding for RoboCop.
Okay.
So yes, it looks like a cartoon, but it's supposed to. He's supposed to be, it's Jason in space. It's not supposed to be it's not supposed to be high art or whatever. But I thought it was cool. I actually, it ends with, so it is really dumb. The very end, like Jason gets sucked out into, there's an explosion on the ship that they're shuttling away from, that they're escape podding. But then like he floats out at them, and right as you think he's going to get onto as the previously mentioned Peter Mensah, the sergeant character, he comes out of nowhere, even though he has no propulsion, he's got no jetpack, he somehow it's so fucking stupid. But anyways, the end of the movie, you see we're back on Earth. There's a lake and there's 2 young people, and this like basically Jason meteors to Earth, and you see his mask is in the water, kind of setting up, maybe we'll do a new Jason after this. I always thought like, yes, Jason X is stupid, but I would have enjoyed a Jason X too, watching a cybernetic, Jason Voorhees on Earth killing people. Unfortunately, depending on your point of view, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you view this film. But again, it's a stupid movie, and there's a lot to dislike about it. But to me, it was very fun. It almost felt like a full moon. Wow, literally, when I rented it when it came out, I was like, dude, this feels more like a full moon movie than it feels like a fucking Friday the 13th movie. But in a way that made me kind of like it. But yeah, it's not a great movie.
I saw it opening day. My dad and I went and saw it in a theater in Brooklyn with a very loud audience, and we all had a blast. It was a lot of fun. And that's, at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to for all of these movies. I have had fun seeing all of these movies for the first time. I've had fun watching all of these movies the last times I saw them, most of which was like in the last couple of weeks. There are things that I appreciate and love. These ones that I'm hating on more, they deserve it, but here we are talking about them.
So there is one thing that I meant to look up, and I don't know if it's true, but as a fucking as a comic book nerd, I thought there's a moment in the movie, and this was like right around the time that that it happened in the comics, when Jason picks this character up, and the character name is Azrael, and he breaks his back. And then in the Batman comics at this time, Bane, the character Bane, who this was part of his, like, when he first came out, he breaks Batman's back, and the persona of Batman gets this character named Azrael, who's a different vigilante character, becomes the new Batman, this armored Batman. And for the longest time, I'm like, is that a coincidence, or was the guy who made this like a Batman fan? And I've never been, I don't know if it's true, but it didn't bother me, but I've always wondered. And
I have no idea. I've actually always wondered if the kind of captain / professor of the ship was cast by a guy intentionally to look like young Captain Kirk too.
I could see that as well.
Although his character is super annoying.
No,
although I guess, however you feel about James T. Kirk, I'm a Kirk guy.
No, but Kirk for life, dude. In fact, I'm very excited. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, which is the first season, I'm really enjoying it. But we're going to see a young Kirk. I'm actually
cool. I didn't know that.
The guy who plays Pike is so good. I'm really enjoying it. Anyways, separate whole. We'll have to do a Star Trek motion pictures.
I would love to do the motion pictures. Yeah, let's do that sometime.
There's a very interesting
another Paramount series.
That's right, exactly. We're not in Paramount's pockets, I promise.
But before it gets too late, though, I think because I'm not coming back to discuss the last two.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. Yeah.
Let's say that we've given Jason X its time and move on to the one that I'm sure you have some opinions on. This is 2003's Freddy versus Jason, which actually course corrects the timeline because if you tie it all together, Jason Goes to Hell took place in 2003, even though it came out in 1993. So that would connect in 2003, Freddy now having Jason. So unintentionally course corrected, but somehow miraculously at the end of the series, course corrected.
Exactly. So I saw this in the theater. I was looking forward to this so much, and I honestly expected to hate it. I honestly was very scared that it was going to suck. By no means is Freddy versus Jason a great film, but I will say this: despite there's some problematic elements. I think sometimes it was very evident that the filmmakers. I'm blanking on John Ronnie Yu, famous Hong Kong filmmaker Ronnie Yu.
First Asian to director of Friday the 13th, there was an Asian director of an Elm Street, wasn't there? Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't remember.
He was definitely the first Asian director of a Friday the 13th.
Yeah. No, he didn't really know the franchise, and in a way, I think I don't want to espouse too much on this, but here's what I will say: at the end of the day, it was probably the best we could ever really honestly hope for a fucking Freddy versus Jason movie.
It is. It's not a great movie, but it still is better than it has any right to be.
Exactly. And like I said, I walked out of the theater being like, God damn, I actually liked it. I thought it was going to be really disappointing. I think that the rationale of having Jason used as almost like a puppet from Freddy, because nobody remembers Freddy, because that's what, and it's, it really understands. I think it leans definitely more into an homage or specifically honoring the Elm Street franchise more than the Friday the 13th franchise as far as historically.
Which there was a bias coming from New Line Cinema, also known as the house that Freddy built.
Exactly. And I think in a way that's fine, because the other caveat is knowing that in a way Jason's kind of the hero of it. Like, we're more sympathetic for this Jason. I think Robert Englund was great in this. I think he really, he's always great, but he really was in top form for this. I think the big ass dude that plays Jason really kind of took the best of previous elements of the character and still did his own thing with it.
Yeah, I don't famously not Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder was pretty
upset,
pretty raw about being left out of Freddy versus Jason after all the
and people blame
the number one thing he was asked at conventions who would win,
and he would bring it up at conventions and in interviews and with fanzines and stuff, be like, I really hope we get to do this. I'm super excited. It does suck. I fully understand why they didn't go with him. Mainly,
I think he does too, but I think it took some time for him to
absolutely. And I think it's still part of him is still butthurt about it. And he had every right to be. But I do think visually, specifically too, for me, big ass, I don't know, 6'6" 6, however tall Ken Kersinger is, with 5'8". Like, they're just more of a dynamic juxtaposition between them on screen, with the hulking brute of Jason, and then, you know, the fucking very ninja-like Freddy in this movie.
Right.
I think Jason Ritter was great. I really like Jason Ritter as an actor.
I like him in just about anything.
Laurie Campbell, Monica Keena, who's like this film's final girl. I really liked her. I think first I just found her. I thought she was stunning, but I just liked her, and I guess I'm the only person on earth who said this, because everybody else thought her acting was terrible and thought her character was annoying. To each their own. I really enjoyed her. You got one of our only really modern scream queens, Catherine Isabel, is in it.
Yes, she was supposed to play a bigger role too.
Yeah.
This was her secondary role.
Yeah. Yes, that you are dead on. Kelly Rowland, very famously,
as the worst line in the entire franchise.
Now, we'll talk about that in a second. I do have a feeling, or I have a piece to say on that. Now, Ronnie Yu, it's the coolest looking, either one of those, like, whether Freddy or Jason, it's the coolest looking movie that those two characters ever got to be in. A lot of people hate the slow-mo shit. I don't have a problem with it, but there's a lot of cool visual shit in this. All the action is fucking incredible, but that's because he's Ronnie Yu, and he knows how to fucking medium shots, people. When you do action sequences, medium shots, no fucking quick cuts or close-ups or fucking fast edits. We want to see that shit. Anyways, he understood that. I hated the fucking wannabe Jay and Silent Bob shit. That kid who basically is playing Jay.
I was going to point out that there was a Jason Mewes clone in this. I
literally left the fucking theater so upset. I was like, dude, and the kid was fine, and he had funny lines, and when Freddy like possesses him, and that whole scene was cool, but it's just so obvious that the guy who the screenwriters were fucking Kevin Smith fans, and it was just so obvious. But I don't know, some really great the sequence in the cornfields, like rave in the cornfields, fucking phenomenal scene, very memorable. When Jason is on fire, the whole time you've never understood like why Jason can get, why even though he walks, he's always able to catch up to people. And then you see the overhead shot of they're just freaking out, so they're sort of zigzagging, and Jason's just walking in a straight beeline. It just stuff like that, and like it just
that was a cool moment, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's a really interesting sort of take on why Jason is faster than whoever he's chasing that's running. But I do want to point out, like, the rave scene does bug me prior to the deaths starting. And this point is accurate towards several other movies in the series, but I've been saving it for this moment because I just particularly hate the kid that's just like, dude, this Everclear is kicking my ass. Like, that kid who, thank God, is the first person that Jason kills at the party.
Yep.
Even though you can totally see him running around with blood sloshing in his cheeks before he gets stabbed.
Dude, or before he like spit, the spit. Dude, Devin, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That has upset. There's people online who get upset because apparently you can see like the blood bag in one of the guys who's spraying blood. That shit where he's obviously holding, that buzz bothered me since literally the first time I saw it. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
I'm glad I could. But my point ultimately being, I mean, because this really is a tradition that started around part 3, where you throughout 1 and 2, you have characters who smoke dope, right? Like Kevin Bacon famously is lighting up a joint right before he gets an arrow through the throat. But it's done very naturally, and just like we've said before, 1 and 2, part of the magic of them and why they still maintain to this day as pretty good independent horror movies is because there's an earnestness to it and a sincerity, and it's just the characters are like, hey, oh, let's smoke some weed, or at another point, like, hey, where did so and so leave their weed? Yeah. By part 3, the pot smokers are like literally riffing off of Cheech and Chong the same way that the one in this is riffing off of Jason Mewes. And that whole party is full of all these ragers. And it really got to a point where in many of the Friday the 13th, they resort to the like, oh, look at me, I have a joint, and then they
Yeah.
started to make jokes about like, oh, are you out here to smoke some dope and have some premarital sex?
Sex,
Like
yes.
once they got to that point, certain portions of this series are pretty unbearable. I
Yes.
like it so much more when like I don't care if the characters do those things. In fact, I prefer they do for the context of the story, because it's realistic. What are kids going to do if they go off to the cabin for the weekend, and hang out with each other?
See, though, this is like, I will say, though, like, first off, if you have a bunch of teenage campers in 1980, it would be unbelievable for them to not light up a joint. Like, and
Exactly my point. And to be casual about it,
yeah,
like they
exactly.
might.
Before fucking Nancy Reagan and just say no bullshit, where, like, ugh, yeah. And now it's like, in 1980, smoking weed was just something you did. Like, there was a period, I think we're finally coming back to that, but there was a period where it became like, look, man, I'm smoking weed out. It's like,
Look how trippy I am,
Exactly. Just try hard bullshit. Anyways.
or the person who's smoked dope suddenly is like completely gullible, like
Exactly.
and the Friday 13th series really fell into just pointing out the ridiculous elements of that. And I think that none of it is better exemplified than that party scene in Freddy versus Jason, which I think is just as smug as anything that's going on in Jason X. And I was happy to see Jason go ahead and start killing people, but I wasn't happy that he was killing those people.
Yeah.
Like contrary to what this statement might make it sound like, I was glad that party section was over. It had nothing to do with like whether or not those were the characters I was now seeing killed. It wasn't effective on me. Like, oh, I want to see these people die. Like, I was just done with that party. I mean, there was even like a casual date rape at that party because they wanted to make it this goofy character who was like, well, Catherine Isabel is passed out, like it was for a laugh. I'm just going to say there's a lot about Freddy versus Jason that I absolutely hated rewatching this last time. But I still maintain the first time I saw it, it was much better than I expected it to be.
Yeah, and the thing is, even though there's definitely big gaping,
aged really poorly.
Yeah, it's very much a product of the early 2000s. Absolutely,
it is the most bro-y of the slasher movies.
Yeah,
like,
but in some ways, there's a lot of nuance in there that I'm like, oh, I really appreciate. I like the fact that like Kelly Rowland's character is like really self-conscious, and she has, she wants to get a nose job, even though like Kelly Rowland actually has a very nice, like, it was just like a weird thing for them to point out. We will touch on that famous line and the writing and stuff like that, because we're not going to talk about this. But there's there's actually a lot of meat on the bone as far as some of the character stuff goes, and the fact that the nerdy Charlie, the nerd in it, like he has some sort of redemption at the end, and just like he goes from being like a stalker, like he's like fully in love with like the Laurie character, the main girl, and he's like, oh, he's a typical nerd, obsessed nerd. But then he has a little bit more of a character development, and there's some cool stuff. There's a lot of cool kill sequences when Jason Ritter's character Will, his like best friend, who's played by Brendan Fletcher, who's got to be, he has to hold some kind of distinction for being like he is in all the worst. Like if you've seen a terrible low budget movie in the last like 10 years, he's probably in it. He's in some of the worst movie. I don't know, but he's likable in this, even though he's dude's like 5'1". That's the one thing is him and Jason Ritter show up at high school and they're literally like a foot shorter than everybody else. It's really weird casting, but
I did like the best friend though. I like
he actually adds a lot to it, and
I had a lot of sympathy for his death.
Yeah, and especially like exactly when he's like he sees his brother, which was really like his death is really cool, and like there's a lot of cool things to it, and like the action is phenomenal, even though sometimes
the brother was the guy from Christmas Story. You knew that, right?
Yes, exactly, and they very the bully, yeah. Bully. Yeah. And they look like literally, it's phenomenal casting because like shit, these guys look like they are brothers. Like the deputies, like there's a lot of cool, like the beginning of the movie when Catherine Isabel's boyfriend, who's one of the biggest assholes in cinema, in like horror movie, he's probably the single biggest douchebag in the history of horror movie. you want to see this guy die so bad, and he ends up getting folded in half in a bed, and it is such a memorable. It was such a great way to open the movie as far as like Jason starts killing people. It's just amazing. There's a lot of great kills. The action is great. The ending is really cool. The like sort of like even like it's like twist ending kind of thing a little bit. Not twist ending, but you think it's ending, then it's not. Anyways,
that keeps with both franchises, really.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly. Perfect. I could say way more about this movie. Now, the last thing I will touch upon. So notoriously, there was a lot that was changed that the two screenwriters were not thrilled about. Like David Goyer really came in and had to like the script was too long, so he had to make it more tight. And they added this whole thing of like Jason is afraid of water and Freddy is afraid of fire. Now they're like, yes, Jason drowned and Freddy was burned alive. Okay, yeah, that's interesting and that dynamic is interesting, but the way they played it, Jason fucking lived in the lake, like for God's sake. He's like,
and knowing that Goyer did the rewrites on this just makes so much sense to me, because I think Goyer is one of the most overrated writers of the last several years.
Okay, real quick tangent. There was a comic book. He used to write comics, and there was a comic called JSA, Justice Society of America. That was a team it was a bunch of characters from the 1940s that they literally World War II era golden age, as they call it, with a bunch of characters, and then they basically brought the characters back. And I always loved those characters, and it was this really great comic from the late 90s, and it was written by David Goyer and this guy Jeff Johns. Or was it James Robinson? Fuck, I can't remember. Anyways, I was like, oh, David Goyer is one of my favorite writers. Come to find out, when the other guy left, it was just David Goyer. It sucked. And I was like, oh, it's all the other guy was. I don't know why I'm blanking on who. I think it was James Robinson, but I can't remember 100%. But anyways, David Goyer sucks. If you've never seen Blade Trinity, that's all you need to know how much David Goyer sucks. But anyways, there's the line in it where.
Are you talking about the exposition scene in the middle of the movie that like my fucking 14-year-old stepdaughter who doesn't care about movies could have written better than David Goyer?
Are you talking about the one where Freddy gives it?
I'm talking about the scene where they're all sitting around a table.
Yes.
All the people who survived the bro down massacre, when they like literally the final girl looks up and goes, "Hey, wait a minute. Jason died by fire. Or Jason died by water. Freddy by fire. We can use that." Like,
how do we use this? Yeah.
How do we use this? I literally, it's
so stupid.
I could hear Goyer like saying in his head, "How do we use this?" And then saying, "Oh, I know how do I use it. I just type exactly what the thought I had in my head."
Exactly.
and now the characters are asking, "How do I use this?" How sophisticated of me to have the characters asking the question that the screenwriter should ask.
See, there's weirdly though a lot of that. Like I was going to say, because like at one point, Freddy literally is addressing the audience, sort of like summing up, like he's basically explaining like what he's doing. And even at the time I was like, that's fucking weird, but it is what it is. You could do that kind of shit with Freddy because he sort of sometimes broke the fourth wall a little bit, but it was just such a weird, and it literally felt like, oh, they're trying to get through this exposition as quickly as they can to get to the killing, which to be honest, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things changed in the scripts, and like a lot of dialogue that was changed. And one of the most notorious is at one point Kelly Rowland's character is trying to goad Freddy into attacking her, and he's like, "Oh, what's with the little butter knives on your hand?" And kind of mocking him. And there's like a penis-sized joke. It's really stupid. But which Freddy says, "How sweet dark meat." Now, people are really upset about that dialogue and how inappropriate that line was, and to me it's just a stupid line. Now, people getting really upset about it. The one thing is that Kumail Nanjiani actually had a really great stand-up bit about it, which is that like he's a child murderer. It's fucking Freddy Krueger. So is that where we draw the line as racism with Freddy Krueger, the child murderer? Like, so it's like, okay, fair enough. He's not above making a comment about race, but and to me it does fit the character, but it's just a bad line.
It's like the G.I. Jane 2 line. Like, it's just not funny.
Exactly. It's just corny. Exactly. But yeah, it's not a great movie, but I think Ronnie, I've heard.
Oh, but you left out Kelly Rowlands has her own, like Kelly Rowlands calls him a faggot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I
Right, and
totally
that's,
forgot.
yeah, to me that's the one where and
And
I'm
that
not
she's
blaming
like,
I'm not blaming her for having to
no,
get read dialogue like that, but the actual writers of the film, and by actual writers I mean the ones that aren't
wrote.
David Goyer. That was a David Goyer line. Uh, so you know what? If anybody wants to jump on the bandwagon and beat on how bad of a writer David Goyer can be, there you go.
Exactly.
But yeah, the original
Yes.
writers were horrified, and most of the time for that word being used in the past, I'm not even going to bring it up because it was the past and because certain attentions to that word were like, we all know the messiness.
Yeah, but it was uncomfortable in 2002.
But it
It
was
to like
uncomfortable
hear
in
it.
2002, exactly. And to find out that the actual writers were pissed about that line because they were taking the heat for having written it when it was David fucking Goyer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that
Yeah.
I will point that out just so that I can continue to rag on David Goyer and to point out,
I'm fully here for it.
yeah, like
But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned. I forgot until you mentioned it. But yes, it literally was jarring in the theater to be like, ugh, like that's like the heroes, or I mean, like yeah, it was terrible.
I saw this one in New York as well, and the audience gasped. It was one of the bigger gasps in the whole movie, and we're talking about Freddy versus Jason. And it also came out the day after the blackout on the entire East Coast.
Oh yeah.
The lights came back on in my house as the sun was going down after like over 24 hours, and I told my dad, "All right, Dad, I got to get out of here. I got to go see if Freddy versus Jason is playing."
I love it. I love
So
it.
I was out the door within like half an hour.
But yeah,
Took a shower first.
it is like I said, it's to me. I've heard a lot of people online like complain that Ronnie Yu directed that he didn't get it, and to me, I'm like, in a way, first off, the action wouldn't have been nearly as cool, and it's a comic book movie. It's not a horror movie. It's not a slasher. It is a fucking comic. It is an over the top. It's almost like a Universal monster movie. It's an action movie at this point, honestly. But I honestly think if another director would have been too, I don't know. I think Ronnie Yu brought something unique, a unique perspective to it, and focused on what we really cared about, which was the violence and the action stuff. So, in Freddy versus Jason. So, anyways, but with that said, as the penultimate chapter in the Freddy or in the Jason Voorhees legacy, 2009, to date the last Friday the 13th movie, the last Jason Voorhees movie. Admittedly, I used to really dislike this movie. I really kind of shit. I gave it 2 points, but I made a point. That was the one I rewatched, and I have to say, it's better than I remember.
It's aged really well. Like,
yeah.
Of all those Platinum Dunes
yes
remakes, which are awful, I did not like their Elm Street. I did not like their Texas Chainsaw.
Okay. I will say I did like the Texas Chainsaw. I actually still think it holds up. There are things about it that aren't great. I think Arlie Ermey and his addition to his character is fucking great.
Yes, I agree with you, Arlie Ermey, and the director of that did do this.
Yes, and yes, and the cinematographer who also. The cinematographer for this did the cinematography for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, but guess what? He also actually did the cinematography for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is, so Marcus Nispel, who, as you said, was basically the go-to guy for the Platinum Dunes remakes. I think he's a really good director. I think he's a very competent director who knows he frames all of his violence or whatever in a very striking modern cinematic way, and in fact actually I think it's been very influential to modern horror, and I don't think he gets the credit for that.
I agree with that. But
at the time when this was coming out, there was the My Bloody Valentine remake, which had Jensen Ackles, who is from the TV show Supernatural, which I'm a fan of, but that fucking remake is terrible. This one had Jared Padalecki, the other guy from Supernatural, and I was like, maybe that's a foreboding sign. I will say, one of the things that bothers me, even to this day, and it's a stupid reason that I used to really bug me, is that Jared Padalecki is too goddamn big for this role. The motherfucker's... Derek Mears, who plays Jason in this, is 6'5". Jared Padalecki is 6'6". You can't have the protagonist be bigger than the antagonist. Like, it's just weird, man. He's just too sturdy to be But I like it. He's a good actor, and I thought he was good in this. And in fact, it's like, rewatching it, I tried to let that go. In fact, I used to, honestly, when I first saw it, I hated the cast. Danielle Pennebaker, who more famous these days for being in the Flash TV series, or the Flash Arrowverse, whatever you want to call it. For some reason, she annoyed me when I first saw it, but now I thought she was actually really likable. Like the guy who plays like the super douchey boyfriend in it, who is very hateable, and you really want this guy to die. He's really good in his role. Like he's like a great kind of douchey boyfriend guy, and like, yeah. Anyways, so having rewatched it, my appreciation for it actually, unlike a lot of the films, I actually liked it more having letting go of my expectations of a Friday the 13th, and knowing it's Platinum Dunes and fucking Michael Bay. So
yeah, it does get Michael Bay'd up a couple of times.
Yes,
but
yeah.
But I have to say the same. Like rewatching it for this, and it's been a couple of weeks. I rewatched it since before we did our first episode.
Yeah.
And a lot of these do just kind of bleed into one another in my head. But I remember watching this a couple of weeks ago and thinking, oh my God, I think this actually might be the best one since like part 4.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, honestly, like it's, the thing is, it's actually
the most consistent one since part 4,
yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah, and again, it's well written. I mean, for what it is, it's got a really tight script. It moves at a good pace. I didn't even really realize that it purposely hits on. I mean, basically, it has a lot of homages to the later film. In my head, it was just a remake of Part 3, really. But it really
it was a remake of the first 4.
Well, that's the thing is exactly. I mean, I knew that I knew that there was Baghead Jason in it, and I like it sets up. Yes, it begins with Jason watching his mother get beheaded and all this stuff, but I don't know. I felt like it paid more homage to the other films rather than just part 1 and part 1. Whatever, either way. But like the Jason, this is fucking. I was trying to think of it, and then I read something about it that was like, oh yeah, he's just like a hunter. Like literally, I'm not going to go into it, but I wrote a short film called. I'm not even going to tell you what it's called, but it was sort of a play off of deformed slashers and specifically Friday the 13th, and kind of taking it in a more quote unquote realistic way. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into it, but in a way, a lot of what I envisioned for that kind of is very relevant to what this does, which is that this Jason is basically he has his safe area that he protects his home, and he doesn't give a fuck if you're like a camp counselor, or he doesn't care about premarital. He's just like, if you come in my area, I'm gonna fucking kill you. This is my land. He's fast. He's stalkery. Like he's not this lumbering brute. He's more like a fucking like almost like a nimble predator. I know it's hard to explain.
Somebody finally took like bits of Kane Hodder and introduced them to bits of Ted White.
Yeah. And,
kind of combine them into this like overwhelmingly large, but nimble and
fast. I mean, there's so many. That's okay. First off, the cast is like, there's all these like great actors in the cast, even though it does suffer. There's a lot of unlikable characters in this, and a lot of like.
It does suffer from that. I think a lot of stuff from that decade.
Yes,
from
absolutely.
The aughts.
All the characters are like, I don't know if the filmmakers are trying to make them unlikable or if they're just trying to make them hip and then they just end up being unlikable. But
I think both. I think column A and column B.
Yeah, probably. But the sequence, the basically the cold open before the actual title sequence, that whole sequence when like, first off, he puts that girl in the fucking sleeping bag and is roasting her over the fucking campfire. That's
fucking
brutal.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. It's like I was literally like, dude, that's one of actually the scariest things in any of these movies.
While her boyfriend is in a fucking bear trap that Jason is setting traps in the forest
because he's a hunter. That's what he's a hunter. He is protecting his land. It's like
he's really into survival.
Yeah, exactly. But that whole opening is so goddamn scary. But that shot of Jason literally running full gore is like you've never seen that. Jason has run in other movies, but it's not really. This dude is full on sprinting at you with a machete. It's scary. The one thing I always loved when I was watching it was the explaining of like, how is Jason able to, first off, get around so quickly? And also, how does he know where everybody's at? That he's got a whole underground layer with fucking spring traps and bells and shit. And it's like, dude, that's genius. Like, that's actually really smart. And I just thought it was a cool way. And the fact, one thing that like I said, I read this article about it that was like, oh shit, that's dead on, is that this movie tells you straight up, this isn't Jason. He's not a fucking supernatural entity. He's not a zombie. This is just a fucked up looking dude who has been traumatized by his mother's death, and it was just doesn't want anything to do with humanity, and he will fucking murder you. That's it. And it adds so much more like visceral, like, you know, it doesn't hurt. I mean, the ending, there's some debate on whether the ending is, if it really happens or if it's, I don't know, but
it's tradition in Friday the 13th to
exactly
debate whether
that's what
the ending happened in the first place.
But yeah, the Derek Mears, I think, is perfect to be that, because again, 6'5", but he's athletic, he's fast.
I think he's my third favorite Jason.
And again, I love Derek Mears. He's our
such
modern
a cool guy too.
Exactly, a sweetheart of a guy. I've never met him on signature, but I've literally stood next to him while he talked to people, and he, again, just with jovial fun. I guess everybody in the set said it's like he was like the nicest guy, so it was hard to be afraid of him until he got in, you know, makeup. But yeah, it's one of the things where at the you know, this is the last thing I will say. There's this whole modern feeling of like all remakes suck. Remakes are just inherently bad. They're inherently corrupt. They're inherently, you know, capitalistic bullshit. And there's a little bit of that to. First off, anybody who complains about movies being capitalistic is like, dude, you know how these things work. You know how movies get made to make money. Like, it's such a stupid. Film has the potential to be art. There's a lot of this is a big topic I'm not going to touch on, but suffices to say, movies exist because they're making people money. That's why they exist and stuff. So, but most remakes suck because they are made as quick cash-ins, or they're made by people who just don't have the vision to, you know, do the project. Because some people like say, well, you know, they're not fans. Well, sometimes the fucking guy who made Jason Goes to Hell was a fan. His movie sucked. So it's like, it's not about being a fan. It's about, are you a good filmmaker with something original to say, or do you have a good idea of what to do? Anyways,
100%.
Yeah, and I honestly think, having rewatched it, I'm like, this might be in my top 5 favorite remakes. Like, at least definitely my top 5 favorite, you know, remakes of the 21st century.
I'll give it that. I'll give it of the 21st century. I think there's a lot of good remakes out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There just happens to be more bad remakes, but there's lots of good sequels. There just happens to be more bad sequels. There's lots of good movies. There just happens to be more bad movies.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, exactly. Like, and you know, my thing is like, look, it's not like the Friday the 13th franchise was like some like bastion of integrity. Like,
right? Yes.
Jesus Christ, motherfucker's been to space. Like, calm down, calm your tits. But to me, like, I was glad I rewatched it because I was able to end my recent delving into the franchise with like on a positive note, because I honestly was like, oh, I don't want to watch it. It's going to be boring, or it's going to be a slog. And then I really was like, halfway through it, I was like, fuck, this is pretty exciting and still pretty interesting. Like,
I was much more into it than I expected to be. This
same.
I mean, and I had just seen it once when it first came out in 2009.
I think I'd seen it twice before that.
Before we leave it, though, I do want to mention a death sequence that was cut from the reboot of Friday the 13th, which, again, by the way, first film since Part 8 to be called Friday the 13th, and it was a co-production with Paramount. I stand by my original assessment at the beginning of Part 1 of these 2 podcasts that the Paramount ones are the good ones. Even the reboot
I agree.
Takes that. But apparently there was a death sequence, and this has been confirmed by the guy who played Jason, that it was in the script, that it was never shot. Part of it is there. The girl that it happens to is still in the movie. She's the one who is water skiing. She gets hit by the boat and has a concussion and is swimming around. And then she ends up like, it's a brutal kill through the pier where like he sticks it through.
And she rises up and
it's a really brutal kill. It's one of the more memorable kills. Also kind of like just weird that they would choose to throw some nudity into that scene.
Yeah.
But I think that was, I don't put that on the director. I put that on the studio saying, well, they're going to expect tits.
Yeah.
And the director being like, okay, I guess I got to give them tits.
Blood and boobs.
Right. But the original death sequence for that particular character was one of the most brutal things I've ever heard about in a slasher movie. ever. First off, it still has her getting the concussion from getting hit by the boat going over her in the lake. And then she starts to swim to shore, and that's when she sees Jason. And Jason steps up to the edge of the lake and stakes his machete into the ground.
Yes, exactly.
And he stands there and waits for her to drown. Right. And that's why Jason doesn't show up for it goes from being dark to night all of a sudden in the current cut of the movie. It's because he spent the entire afternoon watching this concussion victim drown because she was too scared to swim to shore and take on the machete instead.
Dude,
the psychological
when I heard about
that,
and see, that's the thing, that is the inherent intelligence in this film that has been lacking for the previous 6 movies. Because first off, that's original. He literally makes her die on her own because she's too scared to get out of the water. Like, there's a intelligence there and an originality that fucking really was missing out of that franchise. But it's also terrifying in the same way watching your girlfriend burn alive in a fucking sleeping bag and then eventually fall out of it lifeless. There's that brutality and that like, it's just, again, I kind of want to I don't know. I want to scream to the heavens, give this movie another shot. Cause I really,
I would have no problems with part 13 being a continuation of this.
Same.
I will say I was not a big fan of the brother sister thing. I know that they were trying to play off of both Tommy Jarvis and his sister, but also Rob looking for his sister who was killed years ago, 2 days before.
See, I didn't have a problem with that. And again, I will say,
I don't have a problem with the brother sister angle. I have a problem with the idea that Jason kept her in a cage because there's a new Jason in this story who is smarter, more cunning, faster. I'm willing to buy into all of that as a new thing in the Jason universe. But Jason's never been a body collector or in any way wanting. Well, I won't say he's collected bodies, but he lets them sit there and rot.
I agree with you 100%. I thought it was stupid too, but 2 things. One, the whole thing is that she looks like his mom, and there's the whole
I guess I wasn't picking up on that.
Yeah, because he's literally he has the locket. Even they early in the movie when they see his a photo of his mom, he's like, "Oh wow, you look just like his mom," or whatever. You look like this lady, whatever. I can't remember the exact wording of the scene. But so he's captured her because he reminds him of his mom, and that's also playing off the fact that Jason's always been susceptible to that kind of mind trick or that. Right. So I give it a little credit there, but
I'll give it a tiny bit more for that. But I still think it was.
But still, even with that, I still don't like it. It's the one. Again, you're nailing all these things that you're making I had the same problem, but I will say on the flip side though, the one thing that with that said that I honestly took me by surprise. I had even forgotten it rewatching it. Is that it does the unexpected and. Danielle Pennebaker's character, who's essentially she's like the final girl. What you think is the final girl in it?
Yeah.
Nope. She gets killed. The real final girl is his fucking sister. It just was unexpected. And I thought, damn, that's kind of ballsy. To 3/4 of the way through the movie, the girl that you think is sort of the heroine gets, and not just killed, she gets stabbed real quick and she's done. It's pretty crazy. So. I like Jared Padalecki, even though I have no plans to ever have plans to rewatch the Texas Ranger remake. I just like him. But again, he's taller than Derek Mears. It's just weird, man. Anyway, that's my only complaint.
Yeah, that's
being with my weird complaints.
Well, we've talked the entire proper series and its crossover and its reboot. It's getting awfully late, but I do think that there's room to at least mention the whole new world of fan films that have come around. I don't know what this must be, a permissiveness from Paramount, because I know Paramount goes off and on sometimes being okay with the Star Trek fan films and sometimes not. Between Star Trek and Friday the 13th, I think that those are probably the most covered series in the fan film universe. And I used to shit on fan films, and I will still shit on individual fan films.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to say, well, why, if you can do this much work, why can't you do something original? I think actually that there is a lot of originality in the fan film, and I've come around to it. We were talking to Dick Dizell last Halloween, who, aka Count Gore Duvall, and he was talking about how he's in a new Star Trek fan film. That got me to thinking more about fan films in general. But I think it is perfectly relevant if you have the ability to go out and shoot a movie on weekends and actually get some Kickstarter money together to do a fan film. I think there is a certain level of nobility, or a certain amount of nobility possible. If you just willy-nilly jump into like the 15 or so fan films that there are for Friday the 13th, you're invariably going to see just a lot of really dumb Jason actors with really fast heavy metal with strobe light effects, and it will look like the fan films that we all kind of made when we were, in high school and
14 years old,
didn't know what the fuck we were doing. But there are a couple of notable exceptions, and I think you know a little bit more of the notable exceptions than I do. But the one that I can point to specifically that I saw was Never Hike Alone, and its sequel, Never Hike in the Snow.
Yeah, there's a few that some people like, but hands down, the two, because they're by the same filmmaker,
and you can watch them as a full, like, one's an hour and one's a half an hour.
Exactly, and they're different too. They're stylistically different, but definitely. Yeah,
and we finally get to see Jason in the snow, which is like every fan's hope, is that part 13 is Crystal Lake in the snow in the winter.
Yeah, it's weird how that's been it's so weird. That was literally a thing for years, but again, it makes sense. And again, once you watch Never Hike in the Snow, you're like, oh shit, yeah, this makes sense. And again, it makes sense too, because Crystal Lake is in New Jersey. New Jersey gets snow. It's sort of obvious, but
the lake's going to ice over, and it's really, I can tell you from experience, it's really difficult to run in snow. That's why I think for a slasher movie, it's really interesting.
But yeah, so it's okay. So a few things, we don't need to break them down. But the first one, Never Hike Alone, which was the first one he did, is almost like a.
And his name is Vincente De Santi.
He's both the writer director, and he is the
Jason, isn't he?
Yeah, he's Jason sometimes. He's Jason most of the time, but there is also a stuntman that also does it. The story is, the first one is this young, he's basically like a blogger, like a survivalist kind of like blogger, and he's doing a blog, and it's not POV, it's found footage style, but in a way that actually works really well.
Yeah, I usually don't like found footage, but I like this one.
I think found footage has come a long way, and I think, like anything, there's good found footage, and there's unfortunately lots of terrible found footage.
Precisely.
But especially for a fan film, it really works. The thing is that makes it different is, until the very last few minutes, it's not like a slasher. It's more of a tense thriller almost. But this guy goes to from my understanding, it's basically throwing out anything past part 3, I think, or maybe part 4. This guy goes back to Camp Crystal Lake, and he's there because of the urban legends, and he's basically, it's what you think. He's at the old Camp Crystal Lake, and the Jason, which everybody calls online, I guess, calls him Ghost Jason, because he's like, I don't know why, if it's because he's the way he looks, which is the mask is doesn't have any of the red markings on it, and he's got like gray skin. I don't know. Not exactly sure. I don't know. I didn't look into the mythology there, but when you hear about it, like, oh, and his Ghost Jason's cool, whatever. But anyways, it ends. I mean, I feel like I don't want to give out spoilers to a fan film, because I think it's a little different. Like, it's not like,
let's not give any spoilers on.
The ending's cool. There's some fan service there, but it's real fun. Like, the guy who's in it, the main guy,
he's actually pretty likable. I don't want to see, I want to see him survive.
He looks like a Thor kind of, but he's like, you think he's just going to be a douchey character, but there's a sequence that's why it's got a little more intelligence. Like, in one thing, he's like as part of his like podcast or his blogging thing is like he's reviewing this tool, and he doesn't want to do it, but he does it because he knows, like, I'm going to get paid for this, blah blah blah. It's just, I don't know, there's a little more nuance, and it looks really well. The cinematography is really well, especially as a found footage thing. The director who plays Jason, he's 6'3", and you can tell he's a pretty big guy. He's a really good Jason, and like, anyways, it's really good. It's like you said, it's the longer of the two. Everybody loved it, and then finally he announces that he's going to do a sequel to it, and people are like excited, and then people are like, oh, it's not going to be as good. I actually think Never Hike Alone or Never Hike in the Snow is actually better. I think it's more fun. I don't know.
It's got a lot of throwbacks to part 6.
Yeah, I think that's probably more what it is. I think maybe because it's, I don't want to give away anything about.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'm
just watch. If you are a fan of Friday the 13th, there's a lot of there, and there's some pretty good ones. But if you are out there and you haven't seen Never Hike Alone or Never Hike in the Snow, watch both of them. You will. I do not think you'll regret it. They are very well made fan films. Some of the best fan films of any. All the the Bat in the Sun, all the superhero one, whatever. I don't care. There's a lot of fan films, literally two of the best ever made of any genre or subject matter. So definitely give them both enthusiastic support.
Yeah, I never thought I would endorse a fan film, but the Never Hike Alone movies, and there's a third one that's actually a full hour and a half, but it's like a collection of vignettes that they made during the Kickstarter process, because they kickstarted the budgets for these, and I haven't watched all of that.
See, I thought there was a making of. Is it a making of, or is it just?
I think
I watched a making of at some point. I thought that's what
maybe there is a making of that, or there must be
behind the scenes.
The one that I saw, because I was looking for the original Never Hike Alone, and there's like Never Hike Alone at an hour and Never Hike Alone Ghost Edition or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And it's an hour and a half, and so I thought that the hour and a half one was like the official one, and that the hour one was the one they made for the Kickstarter video. I turned out to be dead wrong. The hour and a half one was a collection of shorts that were made to get the Kickstarter going, and then the hour long one is the actual product of the Kickstarter. So when you're looking, look accordingly, and if you're looking for Never Hike Alone and you're seeing something that like just doesn't make sense because one thing's just flashing to the next, you might be on the vignette one and not on the actual narrative one.
But yeah, definitely go give it a look. Support that filmmaker. It's again, I'm in the same camp as you, Devin. Sometimes fan films are made as ego projects, or I don't know, or they're just poorly made. Honestly, most of the time they're just poorly made, but they're very well made. That you can tell that there's a love of the material and of that universe, and an actual understanding of filmmaking, which is, I think, an even more important aspect. So definitely give it some support.
And if you need to scratch that itch that the non-existent Friday the 13th Part 13 is causing, then these will actually kind of do the trick. If we never get a 13, then I have no problem with officially adopting Never Hike Alone as the canonical Part 13.
Yeah, I'll put my I'll put my support behind that statement as well.
All right. Well, it is getting late, and it's looking like you've got some stuff going on over there. I'm sure my wife wants to go to bed too, and I'm keeping her out of the bedroom. But
let's wrap this bad boy up. It was a fun episode, though. It's
I'm so glad we finally got to have this long conversation. But like, I really do. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I adore this whole series, and even the ones that I hate, I will watch again. I guarantee it.
Same. As much shit as I talked about Jason Goes to Hell, I will definitely be rewatching it multiple times in my future.
I have not thrown away my Adam Marcus autograph.
That's dedication. Anyways, Devin, always a pleasure. Like I said, every time, very, very fun. I hope everybody enjoys the episode as much as I will speak for both of us. I hope everybody enjoys it as much as we enjoyed making it. Remember to like and subscribe and follow us on all social medias. That I have nothing to do with. Devin is the man behind all of that. I am too lazy to be bothered.
But you're a busy man. You're not too lazy. You don't have time for this shit.
That's true. I'll say that. Yes, I agree with that. I'm gonna give myself the easy out. I'm very busy, so.
But yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you about any of these things. But I'm glad that we've gotten through our first actual franchise deep dive. I'm glad it was this particular series.
Same.
I hope that we can come back someday and talk about Friday the 13th, Part 13.
Me too. Yes, I hope they figure out those rights, because
I hope everyone's happy, because the writer and Sean Cunningham, Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham, both deserve to be happy with the outcome. I understand it's murky. Who created Jason is different than the person who made Jason a masked killer. Like, that is all very up in the air, and I get why. Like, that's part of what we've been conversing about for going on now. What are we at, 4 or somewhere between 4 and 6 hours if you put these two together? But
I think we're a bit hit around the 5.5 mark.
Yeah. And even we haven't figured out who exactly created Jason the Killer.
Exactly.
So But anyways, we will be back soon, and we'll come up with something fun for you. Maybe it'll be a grab bag or a double feature before we get to another deep dive again. But we hope you enjoyed Friday the 13th. And any last words for anybody?
Nope. Just hope you enjoyed your most recent Friday the 13th. I hope you enjoy whatever day you are listening to this episode on. And till next time.
Bye.
Peace.